Chapter 1002. Chu Liyue's expression was calm as she smiled faintly. It's not us. Of course, there could be other reasons. Ancient Phoenix Mountain is extremely dangerous. Who knows if they encountered some accident and couldn't escape, so they all died. After all, Tantai Ruoli's group of 5 is not weak. To be able to kill them together. In Ancient Phoenix Mountain, there aren't many people who can do it, right? She raised her chin. Even our people have encountered many dangers, and only managed to escape with their lives after much difficulty. As a matter of fact, Xiaozhou was still unconscious. Everyone followed her line of sight. A young man with short blonde hair was curled up on the ground motionless. He had been like this since they came out, and it seemed that he had been unconscious for a long time. Chu Liyue's words were not without reason. Even their own people had become like this. Perhaps Tantai Ruoli and the others were indeed. Tan Taichen clenched his fists, and the veins on his forehead bulged. This Shen Guanyu was really sharp-tongued. Sophistry. It must be because Ruoli offended you before, so you killed her so ruthlessly. Tan Taichen stretched out his hand and pointed at Chu Liyue. You are really vicious. She's not such a person. At this moment a clear voice was heard. Everyone looked over and found that it was a young man from the Xian dynasty who had spoken. Sensing the gazes of the crowd, his fair and clean face immediately turned red. But he still firmly said, that's right. She saved me when she went up the mountain. I believe she's not such a person. Jinyuan. Gongsun Xiao frowned and looked at him disapprovingly. Why was he adding to the chaos at this time? Even if the Tianling dynasty and the Taiyu dynasty were completely at odds with each other, and even fought, it had nothing to do with them. Besides, Tan Taichen had suffered a heavy loss this time and was greatly affected. Who knew what he would do? Why did he have to drag her into this mess for no reason? Gongsun Jinyuan pursed his lips. Of course, he knew that he shouldn't have opened his mouth. Moreover, the battle between the two sides was intense. Even if he was a prince of the Xian dynasty, he could not get a word in edgewise. But he still couldn't hold it in. Chu Liyue smiled at him and nodded in acknowledgement. Back then, she had only helped him out of convenience. She didn't expect that Zhang Xian would speak up for her. He was much more sincere than that old fox, Gongsun Xiao. Chu Liyue looked at Tan Taichen. Emperor Huairan, this consort is giving each other face by calling you senior. But if you don't want this face, then I won't show you any mercy. Tan Taichen sneered. Who do you think cares about your face? If you don't give me an explanation, I, Taiyu, will not let this matter rest. He was determined to fight to the end. Chu Liyue narrowed his eyes slightly. She still had a lot of things to do. How could she be in the mood to waste time with Tan Taichen? I can testify. Jun Jiuqing suddenly opened his mouth. At that time, the people of the Taiyu dynasty did indeed fight with them and left directly. As for what happened after that, no one knows. Tan Taichen's fierce expression suddenly froze. He could ignore others who spoke up for him. But Jun Jiuqing was different. If even he said so, then, whether it was true or not, he could no longer openly cause trouble for the Tianling dynasty. Jiuqing, is what you said true? Jun Qiji looked at him meaningfully. Jun Jiuqing's lips curled slightly, but his eyes were calm and indifferent. Of course, what I said is true. Everyone looked at each other. At this time, everyone could see that Jun Jiuqing was determined to speak up for the Tianling dynasty. If he said it was true, then it was true. Tan Taichen was completely speechless. His eyes wandered back and forth between them, and then he sneered. Good. Previously, Jun Jiuqing had always treated Shen Guanyu differently, and with everything that happened on Ancient Phoenix Mountain, what else could he not see? He looked deeply at Chu Liyue, waved his sleeves fiercely and turned to leave. After Tan Taichen left, the scene fell into a strange silence. In fact, the outcome of this dispute had yet to be determined. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that Tan Taichen would definitely not let it go. He had lost his beloved daughter and several top geniuses. No one could say for sure what he would do. Chu Liyue did not seem to care. He turned to thank Jun Jiuqing and Gongsun Jinyuan. Then, he bowed solemnly to Jun Qiji to express his apology. After all, he had snatched something left behind by the Taizu, so he had to show his sincerity. Jun Qiji's chest felt tight, and he was extremely speechless. He had always thought that the biggest beneficiary of this opening of ancient Phoenix Mountain would definitely be Jun Jiuqing. Therefore, he had very generously invited people from the other great empires. From the beginning, he only wanted to borrow the strength of these people to open the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain. But how could he have thought that the end result would be like this? It would be strange if he found Chu Luiyue pleasing to the eye. If it were not for the fact that there were so many people present, he would not have been able to smile at all. Jun Jiuqing did not seem to care much about this matter, but his gaze was deep and unfathomable. In the end, Jun Qiji looked at the almost raised ancient Phoenix Mountain and sighed. He used the excuse that he was tired and took the lead to leave. That divine power had been taken away by Chu Luiyue. From now on, this ancient Phoenix Mountain was no longer special, and it was no longer their divine mountain. After Jun Qiji left, everyone returned one after another. The matter of ancient Phoenix Mountain could be considered to have come to an end. After the people of the great empires returned to the city, they began to plan their return. This time, other than the Taiyu dynasty, which had suffered heavy losses, the others seemed to be doing well overall. Although they did not inherit as much power as Chu Luiyue, most of them had more or less received a portion of the origin power, when 3 essences is 1. In the end, this trip was not in vain. When they returned to the side courtyard, it was already afternoon. After Chu Luiyue tidied up a little, she went to Chang Wanzhou's room. Dumpling had been waiting by the side. When she saw Chu Luiyue come in, she immediately flew over happily. "How is he?" Chu Luiyue asked as she walked over to take Chang Wanzhou's pulse. Dumpling shook her head, indicating that he was not doing well. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She had checked him on the way here, and knew that this was a sign that the seal in his body was about to break. She had thought that after such a long time, his body would have improved a little. However, it did not. The 2 forces in his body had been pulling at each other, causing him to be unable to wake up. The young man's pale face was covered with a layer of frost. His body was trembling slightly, and the cold air around him was threatening. Chu Luiyue looked at him, and she was a little worried. She did not know how long this situation would last. At this moment, a pattern suddenly flashed between Chang Wanzhou's brows. Digression. Around 6:30 p.m. Chapter 1003. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Chu Luiyue turned around and saw Tsin-Yi standing at the door. "Master, the riddle you gave me previously has been solved." Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat as she stood up and walked over. As she walked, she did not see the pattern on Chang Wanzhou's forehead. So fast. Tsin-Yi smiled faintly and handed over a folded piece of paper. "The problem isn't that difficult. I solved it previously, but I didn't have the chance to give it to you, so it dragged on until now." Chu Luiyue took it, opened it and quickly read through it. Shock surfaced in her eyes. After a while, she looked up and smiled helplessly. "You're the only one who can say not difficult." After she returned from the East Palace, she had described the mechanism there to Tsin-Yi. At that time, she had barely opened that checkpoint in a panic, but she wasn't proficient in it. She could tell that there were other mechanisms in the room, so she told Tsin-Yi about them. Tsin-Yi was the most proficient in these things. If he could solve it, it would undoubtedly save her a lot of trouble. However, at the beginning, she was only giving it a try and didn't expect him to be able to come up with an answer. After all, her ability in this aspect was far inferior to his. She could only describe it as much as possible, but she couldn't explain it. She didn't expect him to solve it so easily. She took a closer look at the pattern on the paper and sighed inwardly. Tsin-Yi's ability in this aspect was really something that she couldn't catch up to no matter how hard she tried. "Actually, I haven't seen such an interesting thing in a long time, so it's a little more fun." Tsin-Yi's smile deepened and his tone was sincere. "Just burn this thing after you're done reading it. If they were accidentally seen by others, it might cause some trouble." After all, it was a mechanism in Prince Baiming's East Palace, so it was hard to explain if it was involved. Chu Luiyue nodded. A flame appeared on her fingertip, and the paper quickly burned to ashes. Sun Yi turned to look at Chang Wanzhou, who was still lying on the bed in the room. "You're here to see Chang Wanzhou? Is he getting better now?" Chu Luiyue shook his head. The two forces in his body are fighting against each other. It wouldn't be good for him to act rashly. So, he can only rely on himself this time. Sun Yi glanced at her, hesitating to speak. "What happened?" Chu Luiyue asked curiously. Sun Yi smiled and shook his head. "It's nothing. You've just broken through, so you still need to adjust. Let me take care of things here." Chu Luiyue thought about it and agreed. Sun Yi had always been the most reliable, and he was also powerful. He should be the most suitable candidate to stay here. She said a few more words before leaving. Sun Yi watched her leave until her figure gradually disappeared. Only then did he turn around and enter the room. Walking to Chang Wanzhou's side, Sun Yi took a closer look and discovered that there was a faint glow flickering between his brows. That pattern would appear from time to time. She probably didn't notice it just now, right? Sun Ding stared at it for a long time, his gaze deep. Chu Luiyue returned to her room and began to adjust her breathing. She had suffered quite a few injuries previously, but after breaking through to rank 7, she had already recovered more than half of them. After crossing this crucial threshold, her strength in all aspects had increased tremendously. In addition, she had already recovered her Tianjing Yuan meridian, so she naturally had an advantage. Whether it was her cultivation speed or the strength of her physical body, they had all increased significantly. Her dantian had already returned to normal. The water droplet floated quietly, and the 7 patterns were bright and dazzling. Vigorous force surged back and forth, and her entire body seemed to be filled with strength. It had been too long since she had such a feeling. Only when she reached rank 7 would she be considered to have officially stepped onto the path of the strong. After adjusting the aura in her body, she diverted some of her attention to look at the Black Pyramid. Now a crack had appeared on it, and a faint light was seeping out from within. Unfortunately, Chu Luiyue still couldn't touch the thing inside from the outside, unless he could completely decipher it. Chu Luiyue's thoughts became active. Now that she was a rank 7 warrior, and there was a divine power in her body, if she could make good use of this power, then maybe she could break the seal? Thinking of this, her eyes lit up, and she was a little restless. She did as she said. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and held her breath. Then, she drew out a power from the water droplet. There was a faint gorgeous color on it, and it was the divine power. Then, she controlled the divine power and sent it crashing towards the Black Pyramid. In the main hall, Rong Xiu was looking at the booklets. In front of him, Ming Yao and a few others were standing respectfully. "Your Highness, this is the preliminary list. The most outstanding women of the right age from each tribe are listed in it. Please take a look." Ming Yao bowed, and his tone was somewhat flattering. Even though he wasn't willing to let the people from other tribes participate, Rong Xiu had personally asked, so they naturally couldn't say anything. However, this didn't mean that he couldn't do it from other aspects. For example, on this booklet, there was actually a portrait of every woman. Among them, the beauty and ugliness were naturally a contest. Rong Xiu's expression was indifferent, and no emotions could be seen. At this moment, his expression suddenly changed, and his eyebrows furrowed. A trace of pain flashed across his noble and enchanting face. "Your Highness, what's wrong?" Ming Yao and the others felt that something was wrong and immediately asked nervously. Rong Xiu waved his hand and pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's nothing. It's just, I was hit by my wife." Chapter 1004. Rong Xiu casually picked up a pen and left a few comments on the booklet. Then, he closed it and threw it on a pile of unopened booklets. Obviously, he didn't intend to continue reading. That's all. Ming Yao was a little unwilling. "Your Highness, aren't you going to choose carefully?" The booklets below were the names and portraits of the women from each department. He had spent quite a bit of effort on quite a few of them. His Highness had never been close to women. He had tried to persuade him many times, but to no avail. This time, he had no choice but to agree to choose a concubine. According to His Highness's character, He shouldn't want to make a big fuss. So it was reasonable to say that a large number of them should be filtered out. As long as His Highness opened it, he would definitely cross off some of the women from the list. But he had only read 2 booklets, and he didn't want to read any more? Since they are chosen by each department, I am naturally relieved. Rongxiu didn't care much and said lightly, "But Your Highness, this way, isn't it a little too many people?" Ming Yao said uneasily, and wanted to persuade him again. Rongxiu raised his eyes slightly and smiled faintly. "The matter of choosing a concubine was originally proposed by you. This booklet was also presented by you. Now, you say it's a little too many?" Ming Yao choked. "Moreover, I am the son of Saint. Since we are going to choose a concubine this time, we naturally have to do it well. Could it be that you think that I don't have the qualifications? We don't dare." Ming Yao and the others knelt down and begged for mercy in panic. "Your Highness, we definitely don't have such intentions." Rongxiu looked at them indifferently and didn't speak for a while. There was dead silence in the hall. The air seemed to be frozen, making people feel embarrassed and pressured. Ming Yao and the others broke out in cold sweat. After some time, Rongxiu finally spoke when the few of them couldn't take it anymore. "You can all leave." The few of them quickly thanked him as if they had been pardoned. Then they hurriedly turned and left. Just as they took a step, they heard a voice behind them. "Take these booklets with you." Their bodies stiffened. Ming Yao immediately turned around and walked forward with his back bent. This subordinate has been negligent and actually forgot about this. Replace all these booklets with new ones. Rongxiu's words made Ming Yao's actions pause. He raised his head to look at her in surprise. "Your Highness, you mean?" Rongxiu lifted his gaze slightly. His gaze was deep, as if he could easily see through people's hearts and see through them completely. His thin lips curved slightly, but there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. "I remember that the second daughter of the Luoshang clan looks very different from the portrait. Which painter was in charge of this booklet? He should be stripped of his position, chased out, and replaced with someone who knew how to paint." His tone was very light, but it instantly made Ming Yao's heart tighten. His Highness knows. He knows everything. Ming Yao instantly felt as if his little thoughts had been dug out by someone and exposed under the sun. It was embarrassing and shameful. His lips were pale as he nodded stiffly. "Yes, yes." With that, he took the booklets and left in a sorry state. The remaining few people saw that the situation seemed to be wrong and hurriedly left. Rongxiu only leaned back when these people's figures completely disappeared from the main hall. He rubbed his eyebrows and slowly exhaled. However, his thin crimson lips could not help but curl up into a gentle and helpless arc. What a ruthless move. What do you think? What's going on with His Highness? Didn't he always oppose the concubine selection? Why did he not only agree to it this time, but also intend to make it a big deal? The heart of the son of Saint is unpredictable. Who can guess? Could it be that after being told off too many times, he got sick of it and decided to make it a big deal? If that's the case, it will save a lot of trouble in the future. It's not unreasonable to say that, but it's a pity. We wasted this time's preparation. Ming Yao, what do you think? After walking out of the main hall, they walked a distance away and walked to a remote area. They could not help but discuss. Ming Yao was in a daze until the people beside him called out to him a few times. I don't know. Ming Yao recalled Rongxiu's gaze that seemed to see through everything and became more and more upset. His Highness's thoughts have always been hard to guess. What can I think? He had a faint feeling of uneasiness in his heart. He felt that things seemed to be out of control and heading in an unknown direction. However, at this point, it was useless to say anything. They could only continue to do it. There's only slightly more than a month left. Everyone prepare yourselves. At that time, if there's any mistake, you'll have to bear the consequences. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Ming Yao said and hurriedly left. The remaining few people looked at each other. What's going on? His suggestion was rejected by His Highness, but he doesn't need to be angry at us. Don't bother about him. It took him a lot of effort to get that painter on the line. Now that he's dead, how can he be in a good mood? Who can't tell what he's thinking? Isn't it because he wants to send the Ming tribe's precious daughter in? Unfortunately, he didn't expect that His Highness would take this opportunity to let all the tribes choose the name list. Their precious daughter might not be able to get the top spot. For His Highness to be able to ascend to his current position, his thoughts and methods are not comparable to him. Forget it, let's go back and prepare ourselves. Regardless of whether we can be chosen or not, we can't lose face. At Rongxiu's side, preparations for the concubine selection were in full swing. At this moment, Chu Liyue obviously didn't know anything about it. She crossed her arms and gently tapped her chin with one hand. Her brows were tightly knitted, as if she was in deep thought. Why is there still no movement? She thought for a while and couldn't help but mutter softly. Logically speaking, if I use my divine power, I should be able to contend with it. She tried to use that divine power to break the seal on the Black Pyramid, but it didn't have any effect. It didn't move at all, as if it didn't receive any interference. Only that crack seemed to be a little bigger than before. Chu Liyue stared at it for a long time, before she could barely recognize it. It was obvious how difficult it was to deal with this thing. Chu Liyue had a headache. It seemed that with her current strength, it wasn't enough to pose any threat to the seal on the Black Pyramid. She knew that a part of her soul was trapped inside, but she could only watch from the outside. This feeling was really frustrating. Sigh. Chu Liyue sighed. After thinking for a while, she finally decided to give up. This attack had consumed a lot of her energy. If she continuously attacked like this, she was afraid that she would be half dead from exhaustion before she could break the seal. It seemed that she had to wait until she was stronger to have any hope of breaking the seal. But that first master said that this was his wife's item. What was the relationship between her and his wife that she wanted to preserve a part of her soul? Chapter 1005. Chu Liyue desperately wanted to know the answer to this question. Now, she could basically confirm that she did know the first master in the past. But for some reason, he had never mentioned it when they met before. Could it be because she had changed her identity? But now her true identity had been made public. According to the first master's methods, he must have already known. I wonder if he and she are enemies or friends. Chu Liyue thought of this and glanced at herself in the mirror. She was slightly stunned, then stood up and walked over. She carefully looked at the woman's face in the mirror. It seemed that there were some slight changes compared to before. It seemed to have grown. After all, this body was only in her teens. As time passed, it was normal for some changes to slowly occur. But this face seemed to be more and more similar to her old self. If in the past, her facial features and the expression between her eyebrows were 50% similar, now that she was in a trance, she was actually 70% similar. Chu Liyue rarely looked at herself in the mirror, and she didn't care much about her appearance. That was why he was startled when he took a closer look. Looking at her like this, in a daze, she even felt as if she had returned to her age a few years ago. Although it had only been a few years, she had experienced many things in between, and had even crossed the line between life and death. Naturally, she felt that it had been a long time. Chu Liyue touched her face, and a thought suddenly appeared in her mind. I wonder, will this face grow up to be the same as before in the future? As soon as this thought appeared, she subconsciously suppressed it. How is that possible? Even twins might not be exactly the same, let alone two completely different people. I'm probably thinking too much. Chu Liyue sat quietly for a while. Night fell, and the bright moon hung high in the sky. It was quiet inside and outside the room. She stood up, changed into a black robe, covered her face, and quietly left the courtyard under the cover of the night. Chu Liyue came to the palace again. When she arrived outside the palace walls, Chu Liyue could clearly feel that the security here was much tighter than before. Clearly, the last time she had barged in, the people in the palace had become vigilant. However, this was not a big problem for Chu Liyue. Now that she was a rank 7 warrior, her strength was enough to deal with most of the people here. Thus, after choosing a location, Chu Liyue opened the enchantment of the palace again. Due to the fact that his cultivation had increased by quite a bit, It was much easier for him to open the barrier now. Not long after, the enchantment opened and Chu Luyue leaped into it, heading straight for the Eastern Palace. Crown Prince's Eastern Palace study room. The courtyard was heavily guarded, and the doors and windows of the study were tightly shut. In the room, Jun Jiuqing was standing in front of the bookshelf, looking at the marks left on it. Shang Binghe knelt behind him. This subordinate did not keep a tight watch and allowed someone to sneak in. This subordinate deserves 1,000 deaths. Please punish me, Your Highness. When he realized that something was wrong that day, he immediately sent people to investigate. Unfortunately, the other party was already prepared and disappeared. He secretly searched the city several times, but couldn't find anyone. It was obvious that he didn't use his true identity from the beginning, so there was no way to investigate. The trail was cut short here. Although Shang Binghe had racked his brains to think of a way, he still couldn't find anything. The only thing he could do was to strengthen the guards here and admit his guilt. You are indeed at fault. Jun Jiuqing retracted his gaze, turned around, and looked down at Shang Binghe. Leave no one related to this matter alive. Shang Binghe was shocked and suddenly raised his head. You mean? Although the news didn't spread, this matter shouldn't have been known by so many people. Jun Jiuqing's expression was indifferent, and his tone was indifferent. Only the faint blood-red color in his eyes vaguely carried a chilling, killing intent. Shang Binghe immediately lowered his head. Yes, His Highness's words meant that everyone who had stayed here that day couldn't be left alive. Originally, you should also apologize with your death, but I still have some use for you, so this time, I won't take your life. You can go down and receive 100 lashes later. These 100 lashes were not given by ordinary guards, but by Jun Jiuqing's trusted subordinates. Their strength was stronger than Shang Binghe's. Therefore this punishment was severe. After the punishment, he would lose half of his life. But Shang Binghe was already very lucky to be able to keep his life, so he quickly thanked His Highness. No one knew better than him how cruel and merciless His Highness could be. The matter this time was so serious that it was really rare to be able to survive. Jun Jiuqing put his hands behind his back, tilted his head, and glanced at the bookshelf again. If she wants to come, it's normal that you can't stop her. Shang Binghe was stunned. Immediately, a deep shock appeared in his eyes. You mean that person? But didn't that person already? Shang Binghe was full of disbelief. But since Jun Jiuqing said so, it couldn't be false. He felt a lingering fear, and his back broke out in cold sweat. I see. But why would that person appear here? Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. He expected her to come back, but he didn't expect her to come back so soon. Although her strength was not as strong as before, to be able to enter this place quietly and open the mechanism, it was obvious that she was quite capable. He had underestimated her. Your Highness, then, what do you plan to do next? Shang Binghe asked uneasily. Jun Jiuqing thought for a moment, and his thin lips curled slightly. His voice was hoarse and his eyes were cold. Then let Chu Ning stay in another place. Chu Luyue had just arrived outside the study, and hid in the shadows, when she heard this sentence. She frowned. Jun Jiuqing had obviously guessed that she was the one who did it. But his first reaction was to move Chu Ning to another place? Why was he doing this? Chu Ning came from an ordinary family, and they didn't have any interactions. Jun Jiuqing cared so much about Chu Ning because of her. He wanted to use this as a bargaining chip to blackmail her after all. You can leave first. This was Jun Jiuqing talking to Shang Binghe. Yes. Shang Binghe responded and quickly retreated. This time, under the light in the room, Chu Luyue finally saw Shang Binghe's face clearly. She was suddenly stunned, because she seemed to have seen this face before. Chu Luyue's brows gradually furrowed. She was sure that she had never seen this person in her memory. But this face, she did feel that it was very familiar. As if she had known it before. Could it be that Shang Binghe had also appeared in that missing memory? Just as Chu Luyue was thinking about this, a hoarse and beautiful voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Welcome, late-night guests. I have been waiting for you for a long time. Chapter 1006. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked and looked up. She saw that the door of the study was not closed after Shang Binghe left. Jun Jiuqing walked out and said to the guards around him, "All of you are dismissed and wait outside the courtyard. Without Ai's order, no one is allowed to come in." Although the guards were puzzled, they immediately responded respectfully, "Yes." After that, the guards left in an orderly manner. After a while, there was no one around the study. "Can I come in now?" Jun Jiuqing turned his head and looked in the direction of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment and walked out decisively. Since it had come to this point, there was no need to be secretive. Coincidentally, there were some things that she wanted to talk to Jun Jiuqing about. Jun Jiuqing looked at her and raised his eyebrows slightly, then turned and walked in. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. After entering the room, Jun Jiuqing sat down and smiled at Chu Luiyue. "Since you've already been here, you can sit anywhere you want." Chu Luiyue did not care about his teasing and sat down opposite him. The two of them faced each other. Jun Jiuqing looked at her with interest, and there seemed to be light flowing between his eyebrows. "Did you come here like this last time? There's no need for these pleasantries. I'm sure you know why I'm here today. Let's get straight to the point." Chu Luiyue was very direct. Jun Jiuqing's smile faded a little. "I wanted to reminisce about the past, but it seems that you're still as heartless as ever." "There's no need to reminisce about the past. You can tell that I've forgotten a lot of things. Now that you and I are just strangers, there's no point in saying these things. Why don't you tell me what I want in order for you to let my father go?" Chu Luiyue was very straightforward. From the letter to the note later, everything showed that Jun Jiuqing definitely knew a lot about her. They might have known each other in the past, but now she had completely forgotten, so it was useless to mention it. Besides, she had a feeling, even when they first met, the relationship between them might not have been that good. Jun Jiuqing leaned back in his chair. "Ai's request is very simple. Didn't I tell you before?" Chu Luiyue slightly frowned. "When?" Jun Jiuqing gently stroked his brows, smiling faintly. "When we were at ancient Phoenix Mountain. You don't think that I was just joking?" Chu Luiyue was stunned. She remembered what Jun he said, that as long as she agreed to marry him, everything would be hers. At that time, she thought that he was referring to the boundless origin power and that divine power. She didn't expect it to include these. "If you agree, I will release Chu Ning immediately and apologize in person." Jun Jiuqing's thin lips held a hint of a smile, but the look in his eyes didn't seem to be joking. Whatever you want, as long as it's within Ai's power, I'll agree." Jun Jiuqing stared at her, and something seemed to be rolling in the depths of his demonic eyes. His voice was hoarse, as if he was drunk, and it made people dizzy. "As long as you agree." Chu Luiyue didn't know if it was an illusion, but she heard a trace of desire in this sentence. But she quickly threw this absurd thought to the back of her mind. Desire? A person like Jun Jiuqing was arrogant, unbridled, cruel and merciless, and extremely proud. It was always others who begged him, but he didn't beg others. Thinking about the things he did, each and every one of them vividly reflected his character and means. Chu Luiyue's expression was slightly serious, and her voice was cold. "Are you threatening me with my father's life?" Seeing that her eyes were gradually covered with frost, Jun Jiuqing's eyes moved slightly, and the smile at the corners of his eyes faded a lot. "Yes," he said lazily and carelessly. "I already have a fiancé. Just cancel the engagement. I don't have feelings for you. Just cultivate it slowly. Do you think that by using my father as a bargaining chip to threaten me, we can still cultivate feelings for each other?" Chu Luiyue was so angry that she laughed. She only felt that Jun Jiuqing's idea was extremely absurd. "Although I don't know what you want to do, why you must marry me, whether we know each other before, and what kind of past we have. But I can tell you that with what you've done, it's impossible for us to be together. Even if you use all means, I will never agree to this request of yours." Jun Jiuqing just looked at her and did not speak for a long time, until Chu Luiyue thought that he was going to fly into a rage. He suddenly smiled. "You're right. I did use all means for this." He supported his face with one hand and spoke lazily. "Chu Xianmin wanted to harm you, so I gave her red blood goo. The people from the other academies wanted to fight with you for first place, so I gave them the 7 coldness poison. These people were not very obedient, so I might as well get rid of them all. Chu Luiyue slowly widened her eyes, and a look of shock flashed across her face. You did all those things. You wanted to take action against me from then on? If I didn't do that, how could you come back so quickly? Jun Jiuqing's smile deepened. They're just some ants. How could they be your match? I just wanted them to help you improve your skills quickly, so that you could come back as soon as possible. Look, it's only been a year, and you're back, right? Chu Luiyue was shocked and speechless. Shang Guanyu, do you think that you're the only one waiting to return to Xiling? Jun Jiuqing stretched out his hand and pointed at himself. I am also waiting for your return. Digression 6 p.m. Chapter 1007. Chu Luiyue felt a chill in her heart. Jun Jiuqing had done so many things in secret, but now he said that it was all to help her? She had gone through so much torture, but it seemed to him that it did not matter. If she had been careless, she would have been dead. Jun Jiuqing seemed to have seen through Chu Luiyue's thoughts and smiled faintly. I am not worried that something will happen to you. To you this is nothing. If she could not even deal with this, then she would not be her. Chu Luiyue frowned. It was only now that she knew that many of the troubles she had encountered before were actually set up by Jun Jiuqing. And he actually said it in such a dignified manner. I don't accept it. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. I don't care what you think or do. It has nothing to do with me. I want to go back to the West Hill. It is my business. I don't need anyone to interfere. After all, what happened before is in the past. It is meaningless to pursue it now. I only want you to return my father in one piece. As for your conditions, I will not agree to a single word. She looked coldly at Jun Jiuqing. Even if you don't agree to let him go today, I will find a way to get him out. As for anything else, it is absolutely impossible. Jun Jiuqing's devilishly handsome face was still smiling. However, this smile was like fireworks that had been set off. It quickly cooled down, with a trace of bone-chilling coldness. Have you thought it through? He asked slowly. Chu Luiyue did not speak, but her expression was firm. She had already acquiesced. The room fell into a dead silence. The space seemed to be frozen inch by inch. After a while, Jun Jiuqing stood up. In that case, there is no need for us to continue this conversation. Chu Luiyue also stood up. I am here today to take my father away. Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he did not take her words to heart at all. He chuckled lightly. Don't waste your energy. Didn't you hear what I said just now? Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. What do you mean? Jun Jiuqing tilted his head and smiled wickedly. I mean, Chu Ning is no longer here. He glanced at Chu Luiyue. I know that you came here today because you're fully prepared. Unfortunately, you won't be able to use your skills. If you want to bring Chu Ning back, either you change your mind, or you have to defeat I personally. Chu Luiyue clenched his fists in his sleeves. I still have matters to attend to, so I won't accompany you. You go ahead. As Jun Jiuqing spoke, he immediately left, as if he was not worried that Chu Luiyue would flip through all the traps here and find Chu Ning. Oh right. Jun Jiuqing stopped in his tracks and tilted his head slightly. The moonlight shone on his face, outlining a perfect arc. The expression in his eyes was half bright and half dark. Since you trust your fiancé so much, why don't you go take a look and see what he's doing now? You'll definitely be pleasantly surprised. With that, he left without looking back. Chu Luiyue stood in the study for a while. When Jun Jiuqing's figure completely disappeared, she frowned and walked to the bookshelf. With her previous experience and Sun Yi's help, it was very easy for her to solve this level. Click. The secret compartment opened. As expected, there was nothing left inside. Chu Luiyue then opened the other traps one after another, but it was to no avail. Most importantly, she did not sense Chu Ning's aura here. This basically confirmed that Chu Ning was no longer here. However, there was one thing that Chu Luiyue could not understand. It had not been long since Jun Jiuqing gave the order to take Chu Ning away. But Chu Ning had completely disappeared. How did he do it? Chu Liyue thought for a long time, but could not figure it out. Seeing that it was hopeless to find him here, she finally chose to leave. The night seemed to have passed by peacefully. Early the next morning, Chu Liyue received news that the people from the Xian dynasty and the Eastcom dynasty were planning to leave. Ancient Phoenix Mountain had been destroyed, and everything was settled. There was no point in them staying here any longer. As for the Taiyu dynasty, which had suffered heavy losses, they had already left the day before. Chu Liyue originally wanted to stay here for a few more days and try to find her father's whereabouts. However, after thinking about it, she felt that it was too dangerous to do so. As time passed, it was inevitable that some people would become suspicious. More importantly, after her negotiation with Jun Jiuqing that night, Jun Jiuqing announced to the outside world that he was in seclusion and would not see anyone. It was obvious that he did not intend to continue negotiating with her. Therefore, Chu Liyue finally decided to bring a few people back with her. On the other hand, she sent people to keep an eye out and secretly search for Chu Ning's whereabouts. Chu Liyue's only consolation was that Jun Jiuqing wanted to use Chu Ning as a bargaining chip and would not go too far. At the very least, she did not have to worry about Chu Ning's life for the time being. However, every time she thought of Chu Ning's suffering appearance in the mirror that day, she still felt terrible. Now she could only think of another way. Chu Liyue and the others' return journey was quite smooth. Moreover, because their strength had increased, their speed had also become much faster. Except for Chang Wanzhou, who was still in a coma, the others had more or less improved after going through the baptism of 3 elements as one's prominence. Not only had their injuries healed, but Jian Fengqi and the other 2 had also broken through their original realms. Mu Hongyu was the only one who had not broken through. This made her feel a little anxious, because she had been at the peak of the 6th level for a long time. After such a long period of cultivation, coupled with the 3 elements as one's prominence this time, she had thought that she would be able to break through smoothly. However, she had not. She had vaguely touched that layer of barrier, but she had not been able to take that step. Sigh, now I'm the one with the lowest realm. On the way back, Mu Hongyu could not help but sigh. In fact, Mu Hongyu's talent and strength were not weak, and the speed of her breakthrough was not slow either. Compared to the vast majority of cultivators, she was definitely one of the best. Unfortunately, the people traveling with her were the top geniuses of the Tianling dynasty, so she naturally did not stand out as much. It's not necessarily bad to break through a little later. Chu Liyue comforted her. The 7th level warrior is a big threshold, and it's not easy to cross it. Moreover, you have the faint yuan body, so you have to be extremely cautious. Mu Hongyu nodded. When she was waiting for Chu Liyue outside the ancient Phoenix Mountain, she had heard many people talk about this. Chu Liyue could cross this threshold smoothly without any preparation, but it did not mean that everyone could do it. Otherwise, when they saw Chu Liyue succeed, everyone would not have such a big reaction. I know it's difficult to break through to the 7th level, but what does this have to do with my faint yuan body? Could it be that it was harder for her to break through than ordinary people because of this? Chu Liyue looked at her and nodded seriously. Chapter 1008. Mu Hongyu was joking at first, but when she saw Chu Liyue nodding, her face immediately stiffened. Chu Liyue explained. The faint yuan body has not appeared for thousands of years. Speaking of which, it is even rarer than the Tianjin Yuan Meridian. Moreover, I can learn a lot from the Taizu. After all, I have the guidance of my predecessors. But you are different. The faint yuan body is extremely rare, and there are almost no records related to it. So far, I have only seen an ancient book that mentioned it, but it was only a few words and did not go into detail. To put it bluntly, no one knew how to cultivate Mu Hongyu's faint yuan body. She had to rely on herself for everything. In the past, her level was not that high, so she could slowly explore. But in the future, the stronger she was, the more she could not do so. How to cultivate the faint yuan body was a big problem. At present, one thing is certain. When the faint Yuan body breaks through to the 7th stage, the divine tribulation summoned should not be underestimated. Mu Hongyu was dumbfounded. No, it can't be the same as yours, right? If that was the case, she was afraid that she would not be able to hold on for long and would be defeated. Chu Liyue shook his head. Mu Hongyu let out a long sigh of relief. Chu Liyue smiled again. I don't know either. Mu Hongyu's heart suddenly jumped again. She wailed and held her head with both hands. Then what? You don't even know Lu Yu. Then won't I be dead by then? Jian Fengqi suddenly said. If someone can give you a few pointers in this area, it won't be so scary. Easy for you to say. Mu Hongyu had a headache. Didn't Lu Yu just say that the faint Yuan body has not appeared for a long time? How can I find it? Suddenly her voice stopped abruptly, and she raised her head abruptly. No. There is a person. Maybe there is a way. Chu Liyue's eyes flickered. I just don't know if the other party is willing to help. Mu Hongyu rubbed her nose worriedly. Who is it? Yuan Jinghong poked her head over to Mu Hongyu's side, her face full of curiosity. Jian Fengqi pressed his head back expressionlessly. Mu Hongyu frowned, and seemed to be in a dilemma. Chu Liyue finally asked. You mean, Red Moon Desert? Mu Hongyu's eyes lit up, and she nodded vigorously. Yes, not long after they entered the Red Moon Desert, they went their separate ways. For a long time after that, Mu Hongyu was chased by a cloud of yellow sand. At that time, she only cared about running for her life. But now that she thought about it, it was obvious that someone had done it on purpose to help her increase her strength. That period of time in the Red Moon Desert should be the time when she improved the fastest. It was obvious that the person behind this must be a top-notch powerhouse. When she shuttled through space, even Jian Shai might not be able to react quickly. However, at that time in the Red Moon Desert, the other party seemed to be able to track her whereabouts immediately. It would be great if I could invite him. After the excitement, Mu Hongyu's almond-shaped eyes dimmed again. Why can't you invite him? Chu Liyue smiled. I'll invite him for you. It seemed that Mu Hongyu had indeed benefited a lot in the Red Moon Desert back then. Otherwise, her first reaction would not be to think of that at this time. Moreover, according to Chu Liyue's understanding of Dabao and the others, they might really be able to solve this problem. Really? Mu Hongyu was in disbelief. She vaguely knew that Chu Liyue seemed to know the mysterious powerhouse in the Red Moon Desert, but she had never asked in detail. Now it seemed that she was very confident. It shouldn't be a problem, but you might need to make a trip to the Red Moon Desert yourself. After all, Dabao and the others couldn't leave from there, so only Mu Hongyu could go. No problem. Mu Hongyu was not afraid of hardships, so what was such a small problem? Chu Liyue's eyes curved when she saw the other woman's ambition. Okay, then when we return to West Hill, we'll get to it. After going through a few teleportation portals, they finally returned to the West Hill at noon that day. Chu Liyue brought Chang Wanzhou straight back to the palace and sent someone to invite Yu Qisong over. He wanted to help check on Chang Wanzhou's situation. Before they returned to Zhaoyu Hall, Shang Guanyu, who had heard the news, rushed over and pulled Chu Liyue up and down for a long time. Chu Liyue was originally seriously injured, but because she had broken through to rank 7 and recovered her Tianjin Yuan Meridian, she had been recovering quickly in the past 2 days. Basically, there were only some superficial wounds left. Shang Guanyu looked around and made sure that she was fine before he breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Aryu didn't suffer any serious injuries. Only God knew how he had survived this period of time. On one hand, the Tianling dynasty was the weakest among these dynasties, and it was inevitable that they would be bullied if they went there. On the other hand, the opening of ancient Phoenix Mountain was bound to be dangerous, and they would be injured if they were not careful. Looking at Shang Guanyu's nervous expression, Chu Liyue smiled and said, "Father, don't worry, your daughter is fine." As soon as she spoke, Shang Guanyu realized that her aura seemed to be different. Immediately his eyes widened in shock. You're now a rank 7 warrior?" Chu Liyue smiled calmly and nodded. "Yes. My luck was good, so I broke through. If other people who were present at that time heard what she said, they would probably die of anger. Along the way." Why didn't you say that you also took the divine power left behind by the Baiming Taizu? You even destroyed their ancient Phoenix Mountain. Shengguan Yu didn't notice anything wrong. The Tianling dynasty and the Baiming dynasty were far apart, and news traveled slowly. So now they still didn't know what the situation was over there. And Chu Luiyue naturally wouldn't take the initiative to say that she almost lost her life. Ah, by the way, your daughter got a great opportunity this time, and recovered her Tianjing Yuan meridian. Shengguan Yu was shocked when he heard that, and he didn't say anything for a long time. In the end, he only touched Chu Luiyue's head, his palm trembling slightly. Good. His voice was faintly hoarse, and it was obvious that he was suppressing his emotions. Chu Luiyue held his hand tightly. Father, are you relieved now? Shengguan Yu smiled in relief, but the corners of his eyes were slightly red. After all, they were father and daughter connected by blood, and they knew each other best. At this moment, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly came from the sky. Chu Luiyue looked up and saw a figure walking in the air. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of her. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly, and she couldn't believe her eyes. Shue. The demon beast in front of her was dirty all over, and its hair was stuck into clumps of yellow. It was almost impossible to recognize its original appearance. Was it really that cute white lion? Chapter 1009. Ayo. Shue looked at Chu Luiyue pitifully and whimpered. It actually appeared with such a face. It was too embarrassing. Where did you come from? Chu Luiyue asked as he stepped forward. Shue took a step back and shook its body crazily, causing yellow sand to fall from its body. The corner of Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. You didn't just go to the Red Moon Desert, did you? This aura was too familiar. Shue lowered its head sadly, obviously admitting it. Chu Luiyue face-bombed. Why did you go there all of a sudden? Where's your master? Shue was furious. If it wasn't for its master's order to go to the Red Moon Desert, would it be like this? Let's go. I'll take you to take a bath first. As Chu Luiyue spoke, he hooked his finger at Shue. Not to mention anything else, it was too embarrassing to come out with such an appearance. When Shue heard this, she became happy and hurriedly followed him. After bidding farewell to Shengguan Yu, Chu Luiyue brought Shue back to Zhaoyu Hall. Originally, Shue wanted to be closer to her, but it was a pity that its body was too dirty, so it could only restrain itself and follow behind Chu Luiyue by 3 steps. An hour later, Chu Luiyue finished packing up and was about to go out to see Shue next door when he was pounced on by a huge snow-white figure. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue had already broken through to the 7th rank and could barely catch Shue. After washing frantically several times and confirming that it had returned to its fluffy and snow-white appearance, it was relieved and intimately leaned towards Chu Luiyue's face. Pa! A small wing flapped out and blocked Shue's head. Dumpling had unknowingly appeared between Chu Luiyue and Shue. Her eyes filled with impatience. Be careful. Don't you know whose master this is? Shue snorted. She couldn't be bothered to argue with Dumpling, who asked him to be so naive and choose such a master. Chu Luiyue lifted Dumpling onto his shoulder and rubbed Shue's head. Can you tell me now? It didn't seem like a coincidence that it came from the Red Moon Desert. Shue raised its claws. An icy blue energy surged out and quickly condensed into a palm-sized ice cube. There were 2 lines of faint handwriting on the ice. Girl, come quickly. It was signed by Dugu Mabao. Was this news from Dabao and the others? But why did they suddenly call her over? And why did they send Shue to deliver the message? The ice quickly melted and disappeared. Chu Luiyue glanced at Shue and nodded. I was planning to make a trip there as well. This is perfect. Shue nodded. That's good. With her around, those few people would probably be a little more lenient towards it for her sake. Right? By the way, Rongxiao, what has he been busy with recently? Chu Luiyue suddenly remembered what Jun Jiuqing said before. Surprise, what was he referring to? Shue blinked guiltily and shook its head hard. It hadn't been by its master's side recently, so it didn't know anything. Seeing its reaction, Chu Luiyue, who didn't think much of it, suddenly became suspicious. Shue Shue shook its head even harder. I don't know. I really don't know. Chu Lue laughed. Looks like it might really be a surprise. She pinched Shue Shue's ear and said in a gentle voice that seemed to be bewitching. When this matter is over, bring me to see him secretly and give him a surprise, okay? Shue Shue nodded subconsciously. Then, it realized what Chu Lue meant and widened its eyes in shock. Bring me there. This. Good girl, I know Shue Shue is the most obedient. Chu Lue patted Shue Shue's head gently and smiled. Then it's a deal. Shue Shue was stunned. Secretly bring me there. That doesn't seem to be a good idea, does it? Master didn't even say anything. If I go there rashly. Ow! Shue Shue wailed and buried its head in pain. It was too difficult. Chu Lue got up and left. Before she went, there were still some things to deal with. Chu Lue came to Huayang Palace again. Pushing open the door of the main hall, a rotten and unpleasant smell assailed her nose. The room was a mess. Everything that could be smashed had already been smashed into pieces. There wasn't even a place to stand on the ground. Master. Chi Han was guarding the door and bowed. During this period, he had been in charge of guarding Huayang Palace. How's Shengguan doing recently? Chi Han said. She's already half dead. She's only hanging on by a breath with the pills every day. He was the one who forced Shengguan to stay alive. Shengguan had wanted to die for a long time. Too many things had happened on the day of the wedding. She had lost everything, and could only linger on in this lonely and cold palace. She was living a life worse than death. In between, she had tried to commit suicide countless times, but to no avail. However, there seems to be a problem with her mental state. Day after day of torture, she couldn't live or die. If it was anyone else, they would find it hard to bear. Chu Lue nodded slightly. I'll go in and take a look. Chi Han was a little hesitant. Master, this palace is too dirty and messy. Why don't I bring her out? No need. I've been everywhere. Why would I care about this? Chu Lue waved her sleeves, barely opened up a path and walked in. Chi Han didn't say anything else and followed closely behind. There was dead silence in the messy main palace. This once magnificent palace had now become a huge coffin. As for Shengguan, she had undoubtedly become the only living dead here. Chu Lue looked around, and finally saw Shengguan in a corner behind the bed. Shengguan seemed to have sensed something, and looked up timidly. At first glance, Chu Lue didn't even recognize that this person was Shengguan. It had only been a month, but she had completely changed. Her clothes were ragged, her body was dirty, and she was emaciated. From afar, she looked like a skeleton draped in rags. Her face was full of scars, and one of her eyes was deeply sunken with a festering wound. That's because she dug out one of her eyes. Chi Han said. Chu Lue finally understood what he meant when he said that Shengguan was mentally unstable. But Shengguan only glanced at her, then lowered her head and curled into a ball, as if she wanted to hide herself completely in an invisible corner. At the same time, she began to pull her hair again. She seemed to have lost her sense of pain. With a casual pull, she pulled out a bunch of hair. Her expression was dull, her eyes were empty, and she was muttering something from time to time. Chu Lue listened carefully for a while and barely heard Jiang Yuqing's name. Like me? No, don't like her. Chu Lue narrowed her eyes. Has Jiang Yuqing been here recently? Chapter 10:10. No. Chi Han replied immediately. Ever since you separated the two of them and locked them up here, I have been watching them closely and have never let them leave their rooms. Chu Lue paused. Although their rooms are not next to each other, they seem to be quite close to each other? Yes. Chi Han responded and looked at her strangely. Could it be that Master suspects that there is something wrong with this? Chu Lue did not say anything. Actually, this was just a guess of hers. Shengguan was not pretending to be crazy. She was really crazy. However, when she came previously, although Shengguan was in extreme pain, she was only in despair and did not show any signs of going crazy. If Shengguan was going to go crazy, she should have gone crazy on the day of her wedding, and after losing everything. Now it was more like she had suffered some kind of strong stimulation. And the culprit, other than Jiang Yuqing, who she kept talking about, Chu Luiyue really could not think of anyone else. She thought for a moment and turned to walk out. Just as she reached the door, she heard a bang in the room. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and she turned back to look. Shang Guanwan's head hit the wall beside her, and blood splattered everywhere. Qi Han immediately rushed over and checked her breathing. "Master, she is dead." Chu Luiyue looked at him calmly, but she didn't seem surprised. "Look at the wound on her head." Qi Han nodded and took a closer look. The moment he saw it, his expression changed drastically. Her skull doesn't seem to have been smashed. Although the bloody hole was scary, after careful inspection, Qi Han found that the wound was neat and tidy. It seems like someone used a knife to cut open her skull. This is it. Chu Luiyue retracted her gaze. She has been a cripple for a long time, and has been trapped here for many days. I'm afraid she doesn't even have the strength to walk. How could her skull have been smashed when she hit the wall? You mean, this was premeditated? Qi Han frowned. However, Huayang Palace had always been heavily guarded. Logically speaking, it was impossible. Chu Luiyue waved his hand. Deal with her. This consort will go out and take a look. Yes. When they reached the courtyard, Chu Luiyue noticed that the leaves on the trees in the courtyard were falling. It was still the end of summer, so it shouldn't be like this. Chu Luiyue walked to the trees and looked at them. It could be seen that these trees were beginning to wither. Moments later, Chu Luiyue summoned the long yuan sword and cut the tree in half. A stream of black liquid suddenly gushed out. Chu Luiyue quickly swung his sword. A gust of wind swept past. That thing splashed onto the ground, and the surrounding grass and leaves quickly withered. Chu Luiyue frowned. The inside of this tree had been hollowed out by something long ago. Men, uproot all these trees. The black cavalry, who were in charge of guarding the courtyard, quickly came forward. After a while, all the trees in the courtyard were cleared out. Every tree had its core hollowed out, just like the one Chu Luiyue had previously chopped off. The roots of the trees were almost completely black. The roots of these trees were intertwined underground, and it was convenient for them to connect with each other. Chu Luiyue vaguely felt that she seemed to have uncovered a huge mystery. However, there was a thick fog in front of her, and it was extremely difficult to solve it. She thought of something, and walked toward the backyard of Huayang Palace. You guys continue to guard here. The rest of you follow this consort. Just as she arrived at the backyard, Chu Luiyue realized that something was wrong. She clearly remembered that when she first came to Huayang Palace as Chu Luiyue, all kinds of flowers and plants were planted here. Even on a snowy day in winter, when the cold wind was bone-chilling, this place was still filled with colorful flowers and vibrant colors. At that time, she was secretly puzzled. Shang Guanwan was not someone who liked flowers and plants. It was truly baffling for her to do all this. At that time, she had even asked whether it was intentional or not. Chani only said that the hot spring water was used to nourish these flowers, which allowed them to bloom for so long. Chu Luiyue walked closer. At this time, these things should have been blooming, but they were already starting to wither. Chu Luiyue stared at the withered leaves and stems, as well as the withered petals, and said, "Clean up all these flowers and plants as well." The backyard of Huayang Palace was very big, and almost all of it was filled with flowers and plants. Fortunately, the black cavalry had always been very efficient, so they finished it quickly. Chu Luiyue looked carefully. As expected, the roots of these things had already turned black. Dig again. In the evening, the backyard of Huayang Palace was finally completely dug up. The water trough that was used to draw hot spring water had long dried up. Chu Luiyue jumped down and looked around. She found an entrance and an exit here. Other than that, there was also a doorway. The doorway was very deep, and it was obviously a tunnel that led to somewhere else. Chu Luiyue looked in this direction. This direction seemed to be in the same direction as the Imperial Ancestral Hall. Chu Luiyue was about to walk in. "Your Majesty," the black cavalry blocked her. At this time, anyone could tell that there was something wrong with this tunnel. How could they let Her Majesty directly take the risk? Qi Han, who had already finished dealing with Shangguan Wan, also rushed back. He was shocked when he saw this scene. "Master, why don't I go in and scout for you first?" Chu Luihua shook her head. "This is the Tianling Palace. What do I have to worry about?" Even if it really led to the Imperial Ancestral Hall, it was the Shangguan family's ancestral hall. Who had the right to be impudent? She thought for a moment and chose a few people, including Qi Han, to go with her. Qi Han saw that he could not stop her, so he changed his method. No matter what, he wanted to walk in front. Chu Luihua could not dissuade him, so she let him go. There were a few people at the back who were in charge of bringing up the rear. The group of people walked in just like that. The tunnel was narrow and long, and the surroundings were relatively rough. It could be seen that it had been dug not long ago. Chu Luihua was sure that it had been dug out in the past 2 years. Since it appeared in Huayang Palace, it was obviously Shangguan Wan's work. Of course, Jiang Yuqing might also be involved. Qi Han held a pearl and led the way. From the surroundings, it seemed that Shangguan Wan and the others had not been here many times. But this still stunned the few people who were traveling with them. Who would have thought that there would be such a secret passage under the palace? They were silent along the way. Realizing that this matter might have serious implications, their expressions became more and more serious. The atmosphere was cold. After about a quarter of an hour, a ray of light finally appeared in front of them. "We've reached the exit," Qi Han whispered and looked at Chu Luihua. "Master, I'll go take a look first." Chu Luihua shook her head. "No need. The Imperial Ancestral Hall is in front. Digression old time." Chapter 10-11. That was the place where she had decided to die in her previous life. No one was more familiar with it than her. There seemed to be a faint smell of burning flames in the air. It was heavy and desolate. Chu Luihua walked forward. After walking for a while, there was a staircase. Beside the staircase, there was a luminous pearl. The light they saw earlier obviously came from this. She continued to move upwards, and soon came into contact with a jade board. There was a circular groove on the jade board. Chu Luihua thought for a while, and pressed the luminous pearl next to it. It fit perfectly. Click. The jade board slowly moved away. A ray of light seeped in from the gap. Chu Luihua raised her hand to cover her eyes. When the jade board was completely moved away, she jumped. Qi Han and the others quickly followed. After suddenly exiting the dark and narrow tunnel, and adapting to the light for a short while, Chu Luihua looked around. With a glance, she was sure that this was the West Hall of the royal family's ancestral hall. Because of the fire 2 years ago, this place had become a dilapidated place. It was full of traces, desolate and silent. This was the first time Chu Luihua had entered this place after her rebirth. She pursed her lips. At that time, she only wanted to die together with Jiang Yuqing and the others. She didn't expect that the fire would burn for so long and directly destroy the entire ancestral hall. So this tunnel really leads directly from Huayang Hall to the royal family's ancestral hall. After Qi Han came out, he stood behind Chu Luihua and looked around. He couldn't help but murmur in a low voice. They must have done this for a purpose, but why? Chu Luihua was also thinking about this question. She lowered her head and carefully examined the jade board. The wear on the edge was clearly visible. This tunnel, perhaps it had appeared earlier than she had expected. The ancestral hall was an important place for the royal family. Ordinary people couldn't easily get close to it. Why did they take such a big risk to dig such a tunnel? Moreover, there was one more thing that Chu Luihua didn't understand. If they wanted to kill her, they could have done it in many other places. Why did they have to choose the Imperial Ancestral Hall? Chu Luihua paused for a while, but did not find any valuable clues. Almost everything here had been burned to the ground in the fire. Moreover, the Imperial Ancestral Hall was an important place. Even if Shangguan Wan came here quietly through the tunnel, she must be extremely careful. After looking around the room for a while, Chu Luihua went out and headed for the main hall. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Chu Luihua discovered that there seemed to be some fresh traces of renovation on the periphery of the West Palace Hall. This was obviously what Shangguan Wan had requested before. However, before the renovation was completed, Shangguan had an accident, so the work here was delayed. Now that he looked at it again, he could not help but sigh. Chu Luiyue stood in front of the door for a moment and felt something dripping on his face. She raised her head and saw that the sky had darkened at some point in time. At this moment, there were raindrops falling from the sky. Soon, these raindrops connected into lines, like countless silk threads, connecting the heaven and earth together. Chu Luiyue looked forward. The main hall of the Imperial Ancestral Hall, which had been burned down by the fire, looked well preserved from the outside. This was because there was a ward that Taizu had personally set up outside the Imperial Ancestral Hall. Once there was danger, it could be activated. It was a pity that the fire back then had started from inside. From here, she could vaguely see some traces. Master. Shihan followed her and looked at her with a complicated gaze. He wondered how Her Highness was feeling when she decided to give up her virginity here. Now that she was back and saw this scene, how did she feel? To Her Highness, this was the place where she had experienced the most painful days of her life. If not for the fact that she was here to investigate that strange secret passage, Her Highness would probably not be willing to come here again. Chu Luiyue said, "Guard the corridor. I'll go in and take a look." Shihan wanted to follow her in, but looking at her calm and indifferent side profile, he nodded. Yes. Chu Luiyue had never thought that there would be a day when she would come back. Even after she had been reborn, her mind was filled with thoughts of revenge, and she had never thought of coming back here. She seemed to have always subconsciously avoided related questions. She did not know if it was because she had once suffered the deepest betrayal here and experienced the most unforgettable pain. In the past, due to her identity, she could not get close to this place. But now, she had regained her original name and could enter and leave this place at will. But she had never come here once. She did not expect that this time, because of a strange secret passage, she would come back just like this. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, falling on the eaves and corners of the house, making pitter-patter sounds. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath, pushed open the door and walked in. It was as if she had opened a dusty box, and the air was filled with a desolate and old aura. Chu Luiyue looked over. Other than the ancestral tablets placed in the innermost area, which were still intact, the rest had been burned to ashes. She walked over, knelt down in front of the table, and respectfully kowtowed 3 times. Back then, she had been determined to die, and had almost destroyed the ancestral tablets as well. If that had really been the case, there was nothing she could do about it. A translucent figure appeared beside Chu Luiyue. It was Taizu. He stared at the tablets for a long time, then looked at Chu Luiyue, who was kneeling on the ground and had not gotten up for a long time, and sighed softly. Girl, you don't have to blame yourself. The ones at fault were Jiang Yuqing and Shangguan. Even if there's a punishment, it should be the 2 of them who bear it. You are innocent. I don't blame you. If these people knew, they wouldn't blame you either. Only then did Chu Luiyue straighten up. Something seemed to be surging in her chest. There were thousands of words in his mind, but in the end, he only had one sentence. Thank you, Taizu. Taizu smiled and touched her head across the void. You're a good girl. It's a blessing for the Shangguan family to have you. Although he was only a soul now and didn't feel anything from such a touch, Chu Luiyue's heart still softened. She looked around and exhaled softly, as if she wanted to release all the emotions that had been accumulating inside her. When I go back today, I'll send people to repair the ancestral hall. There's no hurry. What's the point of staying in the ancestral hall? It's still better to run around with you. Taizu teased. Chu Luiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The trace of grief and guilt from before eased a lot. It was really lucky to be favored by Taizu. What's that? Taizu's eyes suddenly fixed on a corner of the table. There was a dark red bloodstain there. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. That's because I bumped into it back then. That's why. Chu Luiyue was about to explain when she suddenly felt the water droplet in her dantian shake violently. Chapter 10-12. Chu Luiyue's voice came to an abrupt end. After the water droplet swayed for a while, it did not stop. Instead, it began to ripple with a certain rhythm. The force in her body seemed to be affected and began to flow rapidly. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. This water droplet was always motionless most of the time. If it wasn't for special circumstances, it basically wouldn't move at all. Why was it suddenly? Girl, what's wrong? Sensing that something was wrong with Chu Luiyue, Taizu asked with concern. Before Chu Luiyue could answer, the water droplet in her dantian quickly transformed into a transparent broken page. It floated quietly, and the 7 lines that symbolized a rank 7 warrior had disappeared. What replaced it was a blood-red rune that suddenly appeared in the middle of the damaged page. Chu Luiyue was very familiar with this thing, because after her rebirth, she had seen such a blood rune appear in her palm. But now, why did it suddenly appear? As if she had received some kind of guidance, Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand. Just as her fingertips touched the remaining dried bloodstain, she saw that the bloodstain suddenly came to life. It quickly condensed into a ball and floated up. Then, it landed in Chu Luiyue's palm, and quickly transformed into an identical rune. At this moment, Chu Luiyue's temple suddenly felt a sharp pain. Countless images flashed through her mind. Familiar, unfamiliar. Remembered, unremembered. It was as if something was going to drill out of her mind. Girl, what's wrong with you? Seeing Chu Luiyue's appearance, Taizu suddenly became anxious. But Chu Luiyue seemed to be unable to hear his shouts at this time. There seemed to be countless voices intertwining in her ears. Among them, only one voice was particularly clear. That was Rong Xiu's voice. He seemed to be saying something to her. But Chu Luiyue could no longer hear him clearly. Seeing that the situation was getting worse, Taizu was about to make a move in a hurry. But he saw Chu Luiyue's body go limp and fall to the ground. Girl. Taizu hurriedly went over and shouted a few times. Fortunately, Chu Luiyue didn't completely faint. Seeing Taizu's nervous appearance, she stood up. Taizu, don't worry, I'm fine. How can you be fine? Just listen to how weak your voice is. Taizu couldn't help but raise his voice. At this time this girl was still holding? I just remember something. Chu Luiyue rubbed the space. The heart-wrenching pain gradually dissipated, but the lingering effects were still there. It was truly unbearable. Hearing this, Taizu says, what did you remember? He vaguely knew that Chu Luiyue had lost a part of her extremely important memories. And those memories were obviously related to the soul in the black pyramid in her body. If she remembered, it's still a little messy now. Chu Luiyue helplessly laughed bitterly. Just now, many images that she couldn't remember had appeared in her mind. However, most of those images were very blurry and flashed by in a hurry. It was difficult to recall them now, and she could only barely remember a small part. Moreover, in the part of the memories that she could remember, no one appeared. Most of them were blurry scenes. I can't remember right now. It's fine. This kind of thing can't be rushed. Aren't you slowly recovering now? You'll definitely remember everything in the future. Taizu heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that she was fine. In his opinion, Chu Luiyue's own life and safety were the most important. As for the rest, they could be considered later. Looking at Chu Luiyue's tired face, Taizu's heart ached. His gaze swept across her palm, and he wanted to say something but hesitated. Chu Luiyue noticed this abnormality. She looked over, and then looked at her palm. The blood-colored rune had disappeared at some point, and the remaining bloodstains on the corner of the table had long disappeared. Other than the traces of the broken corner of the table, which recorded everything that had happened in the past, the rest had disappeared. If it wasn't for the fact that Chu Luiyue had left it behind, and that she had seen it with her own eyes, she would have thought that the corner of the table had been like this from the beginning, clean and without a trace of blood. Taizu, do you have something to say? Taizu immediately shook his head. No. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then smiled faintly. I'm fine now. If you have something to say, please say it. Taizu sighed in his heart. This girl was smart and quick-witted. It really wasn't easy to hide from her. He looked around cautiously, then took a step forward and looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes. The blood-colored rune that appeared just now. Why do you have it on you? Chu Liyue's pupils shrank, and a glimmer of light flashed across her eyes. You've seen that thing before? Taizu met her gaze and nodded after a while. I've seen it once. Sure enough. Chu Liyue suddenly became spirited. What's the origin of this thing? Taizu shook his head. Tell me first, what's your relationship with this thing? Hearing the unusual seriousness in Taizu's tone, Chu Liyue's heart moved slightly. This blood-colored rune might really have a great origin. I don't know either. Ever since I was reborn, this thing has been with me. Chu Liyue raised her hand as she spoke. At this time, her palm was already white and clean. At that time it appeared here, but it disappeared very quickly. After that, it almost never appeared again. As for this time, why did the blood stain on the table have that kind of reaction? I really don't know. She had thought about this question before, but unfortunately, she couldn't think of an answer. After a long time, she stopped thinking about it. In fact, at this time, in her dantian, the incomplete page had condensed into the shape of a water droplet. It was as if nothing had happened before. However, after listening to Chu Liyue's explanation, Taizu frowned and didn't speak for a long time. Taizu! Chu Liyue shouted. Taizu looked at her with a complicated gaze and said, I've seen this blood-colored rune once. Moreover, I saw it on the body of a great divine ability. Chu Liyue's eyes widened slightly. A powerful person? What kind of person is that? Taizu shook his head, and his gaze was slightly focused, as if he was recalling the scene back then. At that time, I had already founded the Tianling dynasty. I only wanted to break through the 9th stage and step into a higher level. Thus, I abdicated the throne and went to the mainland alone to roam the world. In the process, I met countless experts. Compared to them, I was really not worth mentioning. Chu Liyue was secretly shocked. It wasn't hard to imagine how powerful those people were to make Taizu say such things. And it was also at that time that I saw someone. At that time, he had also shown the same blood-colored rune. When Shang Guanjing said this, he suddenly paused and looked at Chu Liyue with a complicated gaze. This thing is actually not an ordinary rune, but a totem. Chapter 10:13. I don't know where he came from, but when he showed this blood-colored rune, many people were shocked on the spot. It seemed that his identity was extraordinary. Moreover, he only appeared for a while and left very quickly. I only found out later from other people that it was a totem that symbolized status. Logically speaking, this thing shouldn't have appeared in the Tianling dynasty. But girl, where did this thing on your body come from? Just a few short sentences, but they contained an astonishing amount of confidence. Chu Liyue reacted for a while. She chewed on these words repeatedly, and finally gradually realized what they meant. You mean this is actually a symbol of someone's status? Taizu nodded and then shook his head. To be precise, it's a symbol of a sect. This was even stranger. Whether it was Chu Liyue or Shang Guanyu, they shouldn't have anything to do with that place. Moreover, you should have had this blood-colored rune in your body 2 years ago. Otherwise, it wouldn't have left such a mark on this table. Taizu said word by word. With every word he said, Chu Liyue's heart sank a little. Taizu didn't have to joke about this kind of thing with her. Everything he said must be true. Then, this also meant that she had been involved with this thing for a long time. After thinking about it, the most likely thing was that these related things were also related to her lost memories. The two of them fell into silence. The silence spread, and the space froze inch by inch. After a long time, Taizu finally asked, Girl, have you been to the world of divine ruins before? The world of divine ruins. The moment she heard these 3 words, Chu Liyue's heart suddenly trembled. Her expression was startled, and her mind was blank. However, something seemed to be surging in her heart. The world of divine ruins. She opened her mouth and murmured in a low voice. When she said these words, the black pyramid suddenly made a kacha sound, and a second crack appeared on it. Another glimmer of light shone out from within. Chu Liyue closed his eyes, his voice trembling slightly. I should have been there. Patter. Rongxiu's hand slipped, and the book in his hand fell to the ground. He frowned and picked up the book. After thinking for a while, he put it back on the shelf. Your Highness, what's wrong? As soon as Umo entered, he saw His Highness standing motionlessly beside the bookshelf, seemingly in a daze. Rongxiu came back to his senses with an indifferent expression. It's nothing. However, he didn't expect things to progress so quickly. How are the arrangements for the birthday banquet going? Umo felt a little strange. His Highness had never paid much attention to his birthday celebration. In the past, it was mostly just a simple procedure, and he would never ask about it. This time, for some reason, His Highness seemed to be very concerned about this matter. It was really a first for him to ask such a question. Your Highness, everything has been arranged for the birthday banquet. The people below are also preparing for it without any delay. Rongxiu nodded. That's good. The people from the various tribes should be here by now, right? Umo bowed. Yes. The various tribes have already sent news that they have already set off, and will arrive in a few days. There are more people this year. Be careful, Rongxiu lightly reminded. When the time comes, don't spoil the fun. Umo finally couldn't help but look up in surprise, and quickly glanced at his master. Fun? How could His Highness say something like that? In the past, only the most distinguished people from the various tribes were qualified to attend the birthday banquet of the Holy Sun. However, because there was a concubine selection this time, there were naturally more people coming. Although Umo wasn't the main person in charge, he knew that every tribe was going all out to compete. It was said that they had all selected the most outstanding women in their tribes to compete for the position of the Holy Sun's princess. When the time comes, the competition would be fierce. Umo felt a headache whenever he thought of that scene. However, he still respectfully responded. Your Highness, please rest assured. He scratched his head and was about to leave, but in the end, he still forced himself to ask. Your Highness, then, what about Madam? From the beginning until now, His Highness had never mentioned it. If Madam knew about this, Umo shuddered. Of course, he wouldn't think that His Highness had fallen in love with someone else. After all, his master even touched the Pantheon record for that person. But what about this matter now? Rongxiu placed one hand behind his back. His phoenix eyes were deep and his thin lips slightly raised into an extremely faint smile. She will come. The corner of Umo's eyes twitched. Madam is coming? Then wouldn't the concubine selection birthday banquet become a battlefield? Then I will go and receive. No need. Rongxiu spoke and glanced at Umo indifferently. Let them continue to protect her in secret. As for the rest, I will personally explain to her. Umo was confused, but he didn't dare to ask more. He could only respectfully respond and then leave. After Umo left, Rongxiu slowly walked to the side of the soft couch. His long body took up most of the soft couch's space. He closed his eyes, his thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under his eyelids. The bridge of his nose was straight, his lips were moist, and his face was white and translucent like jade. Only his sword-like eyebrows were slightly raised. His voice was low, but with a trace of doting. Little thing, you are getting more and more ruthless. Digression. I want to ask what accessories everyone wants the most? Pillows, keychains, mugs, small tables, canvas bags? Everyone can vote in the comment section and decide according to everyone's wishes. Chapter 10:14. The rain was getting heavier. There was a vast expanse between heaven and earth. There was a layer of mist on the ground. Chi-Han stared at it for a while, then turned to look at the tightly shut door of the ancestral hall. Master has been in there for a while, but he hasn't come out yet. I wonder how he's doing. Creak. The door opened, and a slender and tall figure walked out. Chi-Han and the others hurried to greet him. Master. As he approached, Chi-Han took a quick glance and saw that Chu Liyue's expression seemed to be a little off. What's wrong with you? Chi-Han frowned, and a trace of worry grew in his heart. Chu Liyue shook his head. Send someone to guard this place strictly. Without my permission, no one is allowed to come close. Chi-Han didn't understand, but he still obeyed. Yes. Also seal that secret passage. Yes. Chu Liyue looked up at the dark sky and set up a black umbrella. This was left behind by Rong Xiu the last time he came. I'll go to Huayang Palace again. She returned to Huayang Palace this time, of course, not for Shengguan Wan, who had been cleaned up, but for another person who was also imprisoned here, Jiang Yuqing. Chu Luiyue pushed the door open and entered. At a glance, he saw Jiang Yuqing sitting there. Hearing the sound, he looked up with a calm expression. From his thin and haggard face, it could be seen that he had been through a lot during this period. It was just that his psychological endurance was extremely strong. At this point, he could still look so calm. When he saw the person who came, there was no shock on his face at all, as if he had already expected it. Chu Luiyue closed the door and walked forward for a while. The two confronted each other. You killed Shengguan Wan. Chu Luiyue went straight to the point. It was not a question, but a statement of affirmation. Jiang Yuqing's expression didn't change. What does her suicide have to do with me? He had stayed here and never left. But he already knew that Shengguan Wan had committed suicide. It was obvious that he was related to this matter. However, although his words were a denial, since he took the initiative to say such things, it seemed that he had no intention of refuting. Jiang Yuqing knew very well. When Shengguan Wan died, Chu Luiyue would definitely sense that something was wrong and connect it to him. In that case, there was no point in talking about this matter. I didn't expect you to want her to die even more than I do. Chu Luiyue's gaze was calm and sharp as he looked at him. It was like a sharp blade that wanted to cut through his disguise and see through his heart. I don't know if it's because you're kind and don't want her to suffer day after day of torture. Or are you afraid that if she continues to stay, it will cause trouble? Jiang Yuqing laughed. He originally had a very handsome appearance, but now he was so thin that he almost didn't look human anymore. When he smiled like this, not only did he lose his previous handsomeness, he looked more like a living skeleton draped in human skin. His eyes were faint, and it was very creepy. You're still as smart as before. I can't hide anything from you. This was an admission that he wanted to silence her. You're honest. Chu Luiyue's mind raced, but he really didn't understand why Jiang Yuqing had to kill Shengguan Wan. Judging from her previous reaction, she really didn't know a lot of things. She didn't even know that the black runes in her body came from the Black Demon Cave. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, it was basically Jiang Yuqing who was controlling her. At most, she was an abandoned chess piece. It didn't matter whether she existed or not. Jiang Yuqing was so bold. What was he afraid of? Hearing this, Jiang Yuqing smiled again. Chu Luiyue asked again, how did you kill her? You always know everything. Why do you need me to tell you? Jiang Yuqing played Tai Chi. Chu Luiyue's eyes flashed slightly. I've already ordered people to clean up all the trees and flowers in the backyard of Huayang Palace. Jiang Yuqing's face stiffened for a moment, and the corners of his mouth twitched unnaturally. But he quickly returned to normal. In fact, he had already noticed it before. He just didn't expect her to act so quickly and clean up all these in such a short time. It seems that you rely on these to communicate with the outside world? Chu Luiyue questioned. Jiang Yuqing didn't say a word. These little movements couldn't escape her eyes. He already knew. So now, since she directly pointed it out, he didn't have to say anything more. You also instigated Shengguan Wan to do the secret passage to the Imperial Mausoleum in Huayang Palace, right? Jiang Yuqing closed his eyes and refused to communicate. Chu Luiyue curled her lips coldly. It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk about this. It's not important anyway. However, there is something that I would really like to consult you about. Jiang Yuqing didn't move and didn't respond. Back then, you could have chosen many places to kill me. In fact, it would have been much more convenient for you to do it directly in the Zither room. But why, in the end, you brought me to the Imperial Ancestral Hall? For what reason did you have to do it there? Chu Luiyue's words were incomparably clear, like heavy stones smashing into the empty and deathly silent room. Jiang Yuqing still didn't respond. If it weren't for that weak breath, people would almost think that he was dead. Chu Luiyue waited for a while. Seeing that Jiang Yuqing didn't intend to speak, she raised her eyebrows slightly. She had expected that he wouldn't say anything, just as he wouldn't tell her why he chose to betray her back then. It seems that there's no point for me to continue asking. As Chu Liyue spoke, she turned and walked out. When she reached the door, she suddenly stopped and turned back to look at him. You know that I've been to the Divine Ruins world, right? Jiang Yuqing suddenly opened his eyes. His usually indifferent and calm expression finally cracked inch by inch, and his eyes were filled with shock. But when he saw Chu Liyue's as expected expression, he suddenly realized something. He frowned and slowly clenched his fists. She hadn't completely remembered it. This sentence was just a test. No wonder. Chu Liyue suddenly felt that a layer of fog in front of her had been lifted. It seems that the person behind you is also from the Divine Ruins world? The veins on Jiang Yuqing's forehead throbbed. He looked away and refused to say anything more. He didn't know why Chu Liyue thought of the Divine Ruins world. But this wasn't a good sign. If she remembered everything, it doesn't matter if you don't want to say it. Chu Liyue chuckled. If the person who wants to harm me doesn't want to come, I'll go personally. With that, she pushed open the door and walked out. Just as she took a step, Jiang Yuqing's voice came from behind her. If you go, you'll die without a doubt. Chu Liyue looked back and saw that the corner of Jiang Yuqing's mouth was slowly flowing with black blood. Her pupils shrank, and she immediately raised her hand and waved a scarlet flame. You! Before Jiang Yuqing could finish speaking, his body suddenly exploded. Bang! Chapter 10:15. Chu Liyue missed. Jiang Yuqing's body was quickly destroyed, leaving behind only a pool of black blood. Something surged in it for a moment before quickly dissipating. When Chu Liyue rushed over, the pool of blood had already dried up and was emitting a strong aura of death. It seems that the other party was prepared and directly extracted Jiang Yuqing's soul, allowing him to escape quickly. Taizu said in a deep voice. She stared at it for a long time, her eyes slightly cold. They really acted quickly. She had just noticed a hint of something, and the other party had attacked without hesitation. From this, it could be seen that the other party was stronger than she had imagined, and they were extremely vigilant. Otherwise, they would definitely not have dealt with Jiang Yuqing so quickly. This clue was cut off again. Girl, don't worry too much. Jiang Yuqing's body was destroyed. Even if there was still a soul left, it would still be a great loss to his vitality. If he couldn't recover and find a suitable body, he would be a lonely ghost for the rest of his life. It's a pity that I couldn't kill him in time. Chu Liyue frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice. Killing him now isn't that important. The most important thing is to find the mastermind behind him. That's the person who really wants to harm you. Chu Liyue exhaled softly and nodded in agreement. Then she asked, Taizu, other than that, what else can you see? The other party's methods are extremely hidden, and it's obvious that his background is extraordinary. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to find out immediately. Taizu's voice was solemn. This black blood, and that special smell of death should be the key. If we really want to find the other party, the only way, perhaps, is to personally go to the Divine Ruins world. Chu Liyue nodded. Even if Taizu didn't say anything, she would still go. She had a premonition that the memory she lost should be related to the Divine Ruins world. It's a pity to let him escape just like that. As Chu Liyue spoke, she directly burned the pool of blood with fire until there was nothing left. Within a day, Sheng Guanwan's body and soul were destroyed, and Jiang Yuqing self-destructed and escaped. The two people who had been imprisoned in the Huayang Hall had disappeared without a trace. When Chu Liyue returned to her bedroom, it was already night. After washing up, she wanted to rest, but she couldn't fall asleep as she lay on the bed. After tossing and turning for a while, she sat up. In fact, she had gone through a lot today. She was exhausted both mentally and physically, but in the depths of her mind, she couldn't relax no matter what. Chu Liyue thought for a while, and took out another book. It was the strange diary that she had found on the bookshelf. She had a feeling that this book meant a lot to her. Ever since that day, she had carried the book with her everywhere. She carefully flipped through it. She still couldn't understand. When she turned to the last page, she saw the line again. Exinguinely, Chu Liyue murmured in a low voice. Is this the calendar of the world of God? After thinking for a while, Chu Liyue put the book back, sat cross-legged, and began to cultivate. After the force in her body ran a few cycles, the waves in her heart gradually calmed down. Early the next morning, Shang Guanyu came to the Zhaoyu Hall. As soon as he saw Chu Luyue, Shang Guanyu asked directly, "Yue, I heard that there was a commotion in the Huayang Hall yesterday?" Seeing that he seemed to be a little nervous, Chu Luyue felt strange, but still nodded gently. Yes, it was normal for others not to know about such a thing, but Shang Guanyu would definitely know. Chu Luyue didn't hide anything from him, and simply told him everything. So he really has the support of the people of the world of God. After listening, Shang Guanyu's expression was complicated. Chu Luyue's eyebrows moved slightly. "Father, you already know about the world of God?" She didn't mention this word just now. Shang Guanyu was also suddenly stunned. "As the Tianling Emperor, of course I know. Not only me, but most of the emperors of the other dynasties have also heard of it. Previously, considering that you have just ascended the throne and have a lot of things to do, you haven't been able to rest, so I haven't told you. But you seem to have already known? Did Taizu tell you?" Chu Liyue's mind moved. "Yes. The day before yesterday, Taizu mentioned a few words to me." Looking at father's expression, it was clear that he didn't know that she had been to the world of God. Therefore, she did not mention this point. "I see." Shang Guanyu didn't suspect anything. In fact, he didn't say it before because he considered that her strength was still insufficient at that time. Now that she had broken through to the 7th rank and recovered the Tianjin Yuan Meridian, he could be more at ease. "Now that you have ascended the throne, it's time to tell you." Shang Guanyu sighed softly. His gaze was distant as if he was deep in thought. Chu Liyue sat at the side and waited quietly. "Yue, do you know why Yao Chun, where you were, and our Tianling dynasty are superior?" Chu Liyue thought for a moment, and her eyes suddenly moved. "Heaven's canopy?" "That's right." Shang Guanyu nodded. "In heaven's canopy, whether it is the density of the force of heaven and earth, or the various resources of heaven and earth, it is much better than outside heaven's canopy. As a result, cultivators in our heaven's canopy are usually much stronger than cultivators outside of heaven's canopy. But in fact, on this continent, in addition to these dynasties, there are many hidden clans. They are the more powerful existences. To us, the world of God is like heaven's canopy to Yao Chun. For people like us, only by becoming a true top powerhouse can we cross this threshold and enter the world of God. Chu Liyue suddenly asked. "Then, what level do you have to reach to be qualified to enter the world of God?" Shang Guanyu leaned on the chair and shook his head helplessly with a smile. He stretched out a finger and pointed upwards. "Of course, to break through stage 9 and enter the realm of God." Chu Liyue had actually vaguely guessed this standard before, but when she heard the exact answer, her heart was still stirred up. If it was really according to this standard, then, how did she enter back then? And what exactly did she experience there? "In the past, you almost broke through. Father had high hopes for you, and thought that it wouldn't take long for you to succeed. I didn't expect." She didn't expect that there would be a sudden change, and all her plans would be disrupted. Fortunately, you are back now." Shang Guanyu looked at her lovingly. "Cultivate well. When you break through stage 9 and enter the legendary level, you can enter the world of God." Chu Liyue lowered her eyes and hid the glimmer in her eyes. Wait until then. She was afraid that she couldn't wait any longer. Digression. Continue at 6 o'clock. I feel that everyone likes pillows and canvas bags the most. Chapter 10:16. Just then an announcement came from outside. "Miss Mu from Dragon Teeth Mountain is here." Chu Liyue looked up and saw that Mu Hongyu had arrived at the door of the hall. "Invite her in." Mu Hongyu followed the palace servants into the hall. When she saw Chu Liyue, an excited smile appeared on her pretty face, and her almond-shaped eyes lit up. "Lu!" She had just spat out a word when she saw Shang Guanyu next to her. Only then did she remember that she was in the imperial palace. She hurriedly stopped talking and curtsied. "Mu Hongyu greets your majesty and your majesty." Chu Liyue waved at her. "Hongyu, this is my bedroom. You don't have to stand on ceremony. Come have a seat." Mu Hongyu looked at Shang Guanyu nervously. After all, Sheng Guanyu had been in a high position for many years. Even though he was wearing ordinary clothes, he still had the aura of an emperor that could not be ignored. Although Mu Hongyu was lively, she knew what to do and what not to do in an occasion. Lu Yu could be polite, but she could not be rude. Sheng Guanyu laughed. Mu Hongyu, right? I've heard a lot about you from Muir. Don't be restrained here. I have something to do, so I won't stay here and disturb you. You can chat. Then he got up and was about to leave. Chu Luyue smiled. Imperial Father, you should stay here for now. What we're going to talk about next has something to do with you. Oh. Sheng Guanyu was a little surprised. Seeing that Chu Luyue did not seem to be joking, he sat down again. Mu Hongyu saw that Sheng Guanyu was so amiable, and her nervousness eased a lot. Hongyu has a faint yuan body. It's much harder for her to become a martial artist at the 7th level than ordinary cultivators. Therefore, this time, I plan to bring Hongyu to the Red Moon Desert again, and ask a few seniors I know to give me some pointers. Mu Hongyu and Chu Luyue were very close. Moreover, the virtual yuan body had not appeared for 1,000 years. It would be a pity if it was wasted. That was why Chu Luyue was determined to help him to the end. Red Moon Desert. Senior? Sheng Guanyu was at a loss. Wasn't that place full of danger? If ordinary people went there, they would have a 9 out of 10 chance of survival. Why was you rushing there? Furthermore, he even said that he was acquainted with an elder? Chu Luyue smiled and nodded. Yes. Previously, it was all thanks to their help that we were able to successfully leave the Red Moon Desert. Out of all the people that Chu Luyue knew, the few of them were the strongest ones. Other than them, she really couldn't think of anyone else she could ask for help. Moreover, it just so happened that they had sent Shue to deliver the news, so it would be good to go and take a look. This time, Hongyu and I are not sure when we will return. Therefore, there are many things in the Tianling dynasty that I need you to take care of. Of course, Sheng Guanyu would not object. Don't worry. With me around, you can do whatever you want. Chu Luyue looked a little apologetic. I wanted to let you have some leisure time, but I didn't expect, in the end, I still have to trouble you. What's so troublesome about that? Sheng Guanyu looked at her disapprovingly. Moreover, you are my daughter. If I don't help you, who else can I help? Don't worry. Now that I have recovered, nothing will happen to me. Chu Luyue felt a warmth in her heart. In fact, she came back this time to let her father have a good rest and make up for what he had done before. However, she didn't expect so many things to happen after that. She joked. If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to your and Taizu's proposal to ascend the throne that day. In the end, you are still the one who is busy with these things. Sheng Guanyu laughed. Anyway, this position will be yours sooner or later. It's better to be early than late. The Tianling royal family has no descendants in this lifetime. In addition, Sheng Guanwan had attacked many people. The royal family's descendants were either dead or disabled, or they were still young. Among them, the only one who could shoulder the burden was Chu Luyue. When do you plan to go? Sheng Guanyu asked. Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu looked at each other. Today. The sun was scorching in the Red Moon Desert. Yellow sand covered the sky as far as the eye could see. The heat waves were rolling, and even the air was distorted. A snow-white figure suddenly appeared in the sky above the desert. Following closely behind was a red-tailed phoenix with its wings spread out. Chu Luyue and Mu Hongyu stood on Dumpling's back, their clothes fluttering in the wind. We'll be there soon, Chu Luyue said. Mu Hongyu nodded, but her eyes fell on Shue in front of her from time to time. She seemed to be distracted. This figure, why does it look so familiar? Hongyao, what are you thinking about? Chu Luyue had long noticed that Mu Hongyu's state was a little strange. Along the way, she seemed to be a little absent-minded. Nothing, I just feel that this white lion is quite familiar. Mu Hongyu murmured in a low voice. When she saw Shue rushing towards the desert below, a light suddenly flashed in her mind. Right. This white lion was very similar to the divine beast they had seen in the mystic forest. Shue. This is Rongxiu's magical beast, Chu Luyue explained. When they were in the palace, Rongxiu had summoned Shue out. Many people had seen it, so there was no need to deliberately hide it. What? You said it is the divine beast of His Highness Prince Li? Mu Hongyu was shocked. The news of Rong Xiao having a divine beast was still a hot topic in the entire West Hill some time ago. Although she didn't pay attention to it deliberately, she had heard about it. She didn't expect it to be. Then, if this was really the one they saw previously, didn't that mean that Rong Xiao was actually here at that time? What's wrong? Chu Liyue saw that her reaction was a little strange and asked. Mu Hongyu hesitated for a moment, and was about to speak, when she suddenly heard a rustling sound from the desert below. The two of them looked down together. Yellow sand rolled on several undulating sand dunes, creating a huge commotion. Chu Liyue immediately said, "Seniors, it's me." An androgynous snort seemed to come from afar. "Lass, you still know to come back?" This was Lan Zhao's voice. Although it sounded angry, there was no anger. Instead, there was a trace of joy that he was trying his best to restrain. "Hurry up and come down." Chu Liyue couldn't help but laugh. She didn't know why, but when she heard this voice again, she actually felt very close. "Hongyu, let's go down." She gently patted Dumpling's head, and then jumped. Sigh. Before Mu Hongyu could ask clearly, she saw that she had gone down, and could only follow closely behind. The moment Chu Liyue landed, the yellow sand under her feet moved quickly and sent her forward. It wasn't until he saw the sparkling sapphire-like lake that he finally stopped. Chu Liyue had just stood still when she heard Diwu Zhang's surprised voice. Lass, you broke through to become a stage 7 warrior?" Chapter 10:17. Because it was too unexpected, Diwu Zhangzi didn't send a voice transmission to Chu Liyue like Lan Xiao, so it spread across the desert. Mu Hongyu, who rushed over, heard the voice and immediately looked around vigilantly. "Who is it?" Chu Liyue smiled comfortingly. "Don't worry, these are the people I mentioned to you before." The one who spoke was Senior Diwu Zhangzi. "Hee, little girl, you actually don't remember me?" Elder Diwu Zhangzi laughed. "Seems like you haven't suffered enough from the previous time?" Mu Hongyu was stunned. Then, she suddenly recalled something, and her eyes widened in shock. Why you? It was you last time." Whoosh! A cloud of yellow sand suddenly condensed and flew in front of Mu Hongyu. Swoosh! Mu Hongyu's figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Other than leaving an extremely light spatial fluctuation, almost no one would notice anything unusual. Chu Liyue's eyes flickered. If she hadn't broken through to become a stage 7 warrior and had sharper senses, she probably wouldn't have been able to detect this small fluctuation. The faint Yuan body was indeed worthy of its reputation. In the next moment, Mu Hongyu appeared on a sand dune 1,000 feet away. Phew, luckily I dodged it. Mu Hongyu was secretly rejoicing when she realized that the cloud of yellow sand was still floating quietly in the same spot, and didn't chase after her at all. She was in a daze and realized that she seemed to have overreacted. "Ha ha ha. Seems like you've improved during this period of time." Diwu Zhangzi laughed loudly. Poof! That cloud of yellow sand scattered on the ground. Mu Hongyu blushed slightly, and realized that he was just teasing her. Chu Liyue looked at the lake helplessly. "Senior Diwu, you tortured Hongyu badly last time. Please don't make fun of her." Mu Hongyu appeared beside Chu Liyue in a flash and smiled embarrassedly. "Liyu, don't worry. I'm fine. If it wasn't for the senior's guidance, I wouldn't have improved so quickly." Although her face was still a little red, her tone was very sincere and magnanimous. She was indeed grateful for Diwu Zhangzi's help from the bottom of her heart. As she spoke, she solemnly bowed to the other side to express her gratitude. Seeing that Mu Hongyu was in such a good mood, Chu Liyue was also relieved. Diwu Zhangzi, on the other hand, was a little surprised. Good. This child is worth teaching. To be able to become friends with you, all aspects would not be lacking. Tianjing Yuan Meridian? At this moment, another familiar voice sounded. "When did you recover?" Although the tone was cold and arrogant, it was a pity that the silver voice was soft and childish. It was not intimidating at all. Following this voice, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake. Chu Liyue laughed. "Just a few days ago." Duga Mabao snorted. That's more like it. After everyone learned that Chu Luyue had recovered the Tianjin Yuan meridian, they were either shocked, envious, or in disbelief. In short, there were all kinds of emotions. Only Dugu Mabao did not have such feelings. There was a slight disdain, and a full sense of matter-of-fact. It seemed that Chu Luyue's recovery of the Tianjin Yuan meridian was normal and barely acceptable. Mu Hongyu secretly stuck her tongue out at Chu Luyue. Although they didn't see him, just hearing his words was enough to shock them. The Tianjin Yuan meridian was such a rare talent. In the entire Tianling dynasty, there had only been 2 people with it in the past 1,000 years. Countless people in the world were envious of it. And when it came to this senior, it was actually just a little bit. Mu Hongyu now vaguely understood why Chu Luyue said that the seniors here might be able to help her with the faint Yuan body. Chu Luyue did not seem to mind, and his eyes were curved. It was a coincidence, and I was lucky. I recovered when I broke through to become a stage 7 warrior. The corner of Mu Hongyu's eyes twitched fiercely. These people are so perverted. She vaguely felt that if she continued to stay here, her days would not be too good. Although she was already mentally prepared, she realized that she was still too naive until now. Other than the appointment, I came here this time to ask the seniors for a favor. What she was afraid of came true. Just as Mu Hongyu's heart was trembling, Chu Luyue grabbed her hand and pushed it forward. Hongyu has the faint Yuan body, and she's getting closer and closer to becoming a stage 7 warrior. I once read in an ancient book that the divine tribulation of the faint Yuan body is extremely difficult to pass. So, I would like to ask the seniors for help and guidance. I wonder, this small matter is naturally not a problem. Diwu Zhangzi agreed immediately. With me here, I guarantee to help her successfully pass the divine tribulation. Chu Luyue's eyes lit up. Are you really willing to help? What's the big deal? The faint Yuan body is a good seedling after all. It would be a pity if it was wasted. Diwu Zhangzi couldn't help but sneer as he spoke. Those mediocre people of the Tianling dynasty will only delay her. For the next period of time, you just have to stay here until you pass the divine tribulation. Since he said so, he really intended to help. Thank you, Senior Diwu. Mu Hongyu also hurriedly bowed respectfully. Thank you, Senior Diwu. After finalizing this matter, Chu Luyue breathed a sigh of relief. By the way, may I know why the seniors have asked me to come here? After settling Mu Hongyu, Chu Luyue turned his attention back to this matter. Diwu Zhangzi didn't answer immediately. Instead, he seemed to hesitate. I'll let Debao tell you. I'll bring her around to familiarize herself with the environment first. After saying that, he shouted, Brother, Hongyu, come quickly. Mu Hongyu hurriedly replied, That's right. Oh, okay. After speaking, she looked at Chu Luyue hesitantly. Chu Luyue gave her a reassuring look. Just go ahead. Mu Hongyu nodded. A cloud of yellow sand suddenly appeared beside her. Oh, it's here again. Mu Hongyu wailed and scurried away instantly. Soon, only Chu Luyue was left here. The sun was scorching hot, and there was no wind around. However, ripples appeared on the surface of the lake not far away. Come here. It was Lan Zhao's voice. Chu Luyue followed the voice and walked over. When she reached the lakeside, she subconsciously looked down. There seemed to be dark shadows gathering in the clear lake. Actually, I asked you to come this time because Debao needs your help with something. Lan Zhao's tone was a little strange. Chu Luyue was stunned. Debao wanted her help? These people were all very strong, especially Debao. What did he need her help with? As long as it's within my power, I won't refuse. I wonder, what's the matter? Lan Zhao said lightly. Debao, do you want me to help you? Or do you want to tell the girl yourself? Dead silence. After a while, Dugu Mabao's extremely awkward voice was heard. I've condensed a divine body, and need your power as a primer to awaken it. Chapter 10:18. Divine Body. Primer? Chu Luyue was dazed when she heard that. This divine body is. After a cultivator breaks through the stage 9 and enters the godly realm, He can use the force of heaven and earth to refine his body and form a divine body. A normal cultivator's physical strength is limited, but a divine body is different. It has unlimited potential, and once a cultivator reaches the paragon stage, he will be immortal. Therefore, a divine body is very important to a cultivator. More importantly, once a cultivator reaches this stage, even if his physical body is destroyed, he can refine it again and reconstruct a divine body. Our physical bodies have been destroyed, and we are only left with a few souls. We relied on the force of heaven and earth to refine a divine body. As long as we awaken the divine body, Debeo will be able to leave this place. Chu Luiwa blinked, and joy appeared on her face. That's a great thing. If my strength is able to help you, I will definitely do my best to help you. She knew that Dugu Mabao and the others were trapped here for some reason and couldn't leave. They could only come out for a short while during the red moon every month. Most of the time, they stayed in the desert in the dark. Now that Dugu Mabao had a divine body, they could come out in the future. The world was so big, where couldn't they go? This is a good thing, but there is a small problem with Debeo. Lan Zhao's tone sounded like he was trying to hold back his laughter. What problem? Chu Luiwa asked. Actually, it's nothing. When you rushed back to Xiling, he was anxious to help you, so he sped up the process of refining the divine body. Lan Xiao, if you don't want your tongue, I can pull it out for you. Dugu Mabao's voice was filled with murderous intent. Okay. I won't say any more. You can tell you, or yourself. Lan Xiao begged for mercy, and it was rare that he didn't fight with Dugu Mabao. This made Chu Luiwa feel even more strange. This divine body was so important. Since it had been refined, what other problems could there be? And why does Lan Xiao sound like this has something to do with me? She thought for a moment and said, Senior, where is your divine body now? What should I do to wake him up? Just as he finished speaking, the waves on the surface of the water suddenly became bigger. Then, a whirlpool appeared in the center of the sapphire lake. The ripples spread out in all directions, and the center gradually caved in. A cocoon suffused with a faint purple light slowly rose from within. A divine and powerful pressure faintly came from above. Just by standing there, Chu Luiwa already felt a stifling feeling in his chest. The origin power in his body suddenly slowed down at this moment. This was the aura of an absolute crushing powerhouse. Chu Luiwa was secretly shocked. This was just a divine body that had yet to awaken, yet it was already so terrifying. Who knew how astonishing Dugu Mabao's true strength was? At this moment, a gentle yet powerful energy suddenly gushed out from the water droplet in her body, entering her limbs and bones. That oppressive feeling dissipated by a lot. However, Chu Luiwa still held her breath and looked ahead without blinking, not daring to miss a single thing. My divine body is inside here. For some reason, Dugu Mabao's voice sounded even more awkward. Later, you just need to prick your index finger and inject some origin power into it. Chu Luiwa nodded slightly. Okay. Then, the cocoon of light flew toward Chu Luiwa. Perhaps Dugu Mabao had purposely restrained his aura, so Chu Luiwa did not feel any stronger pressure. With the support of the water droplet's power, she could barely stand still. At this moment, Chu Luiwa thought of a problem. Why does this cocoon of light look a little small? Since it's a divine body, it shouldn't look like this. This thought flashed through his mind. Soon, the cocoon of light floated to a step away from Chu Luiwa. There was a faint layer of purple on the cocoon of light, which was magnificent and beautiful. It was a blur inside, and she could not see it clearly. Chu Luiwa did not think much of it. She bit her index finger, and a dark red blood droplet quickly appeared. Then, the blood droplet seemed to be guided by some kind of power. It left Chu Luiwa's fingertip and floated toward the cocoon of light. Of course, at the same time, it contained an extremely rich origin power. The blood droplet quickly landed in the middle of the cocoon of light. The moment it touched the cocoon of light, the blood droplet quickly disappeared. Then, with a buzzing sound, the cocoon of light suddenly shone brightly. Chu Luiwa instinctively raised her hand to cover her eyes. The purple light shone brightly. Crack! Chu Luiwa clearly heard the sound of something breaking. When the light gradually dissipated, she looked up and looked ahead. With one look, She was stunned on the spot. The cocoon of light had disappeared. It was as if a layer of gauze had been lifted, and she could finally see the situation inside. A child who looked to be 3 or 4 years old was quietly floating in the air. His small face was fair and cute, pink and chubby. His eyelashes were unbelievably thick and slightly curled. He had short purple hair that was fluffy and soft. When the breeze blew, it gently fluttered. As if sensing Chu Liyue's gaze, he suddenly opened his eyes. A pair of purple eyes. They were so beautiful that they were almost demonic. The two of them looked at each other. He frowned, and his expression was fierce. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen it before?" This sentence was originally very imposing, but it was a pity that the voice was too cute and did not have much deterrence. Chu Liyue came back to her senses, stretched out her hand and pointed. Debao, you're not wearing clothes." Chapter 10:19. Dugumabao's face froze for a moment. Then, Chu Liyue saw his face turn red at a speed visible to the naked eye. It was as though blood was dripping out. Boom! A purple flame suddenly exploded in front of Chu Liyue. She immediately retreated and narrowly avoided it. A strand of hair on her forehead was burnt, emitting a faint burnt smell. The little person opposite her was quickly covered in a layer of faint purple light. Then he waved his little hands. When the light dissipated, he had already changed into a purple robe. The robe was very exquisite. Under the sunlight, it reflected a faint glow and looked more like a soft armor. Chu Liyue looked at the scene in front of her with a complicated expression. Originally, this appearance was supposed to be majestic and dignified, but unfortunately, Debao's image had completely collapsed in her heart. Ha 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 ha. A burst of loud laughter suddenly erupted from the lake. "Debao! Ha 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 ha. You didn't wear any clothes when you saw you? Ha 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 ha." Lan Xiao always spoke casually like an immortal. This was the first time Chu Liyue heard such a forthright laugh from him. The corner of her eyes twitched slightly. I seem to have laughed a little too loudly. Indeed, the more Lan Xiao laughed, the more gloomy Debao's face became. Her face, which was originally red, immediately turned black and red. The newly condensed godly body didn't wear any clothes, but he was careless just now and forgot about it. Moreover, the process was very difficult. The three of them had been trapped here for many years, and he was the first to succeed. "You haven't even condensed half a godly body. What right do you have to laugh here?" Debao gritted his teeth and said. Lan Xiao didn't sense the danger at all. Instead, he laughed even harder. "Ha ha ha ha. But you didn't wear any clothes. Ha 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 ha. Are you done laughing?" Debao said each word coldly as if there was endless pressure. Ha ha ha. Lan Zhao's voice stopped abruptly. Poof! There was a sudden explosion in the lake. Then the surroundings finally quieted down. The whirlpool in the lake quickly recovered, leaving only a few ripples. Dugumabao's back was facing Chu Liyue. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. However, he did not turn around for a long time. The atmosphere was very awkward. Debao. Chu Liyue stood still for a while. Seeing that he still hadn't moved, he couldn't help but call out to him. Dugumabao resigned himself to his fate and turned around. "What?" He raised his chin slightly and asked coldly with an expressionless face. The corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows seemed to carry a hint of impatience. Chu Liyue shifted his gaze. The expression on his little face had already returned to normal, but there was still a trace of redness on his ears that had not yet faded. He looked like a child who had done something wrong and refused to admit his mistake. This way, even if they knew that he had a divine body, the threat he posed was still zero. Chu Liyue held back his laughter and said with a very serious and sincere expression, "Debao, did I help you?" Only then did Debao's expression soften a little. He turned his face and looked into the distance. After a moment he responded with an Chu Liyue smiled, his eyes curved. "That's good. However, can I ask, why can I help you like this?" Chu Liyue's eyes were filled with curiosity. Although she had broken through to become a rank 7 warrior, and even had a strand of divine power stored in her body, it didn't seem like it was the turn of a cultivator of her level to awaken a divine body, right? Why didn't she know that she was so powerful? Dugumabao frowned. Of course it's because of you, it's you. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What did he mean by that? Dugumabao glanced at her and saw her blank expression. He suddenly remembered that she had forgotten those things. He opened his mouth, but when the words reached his mouth, he changed his mind. After the divine body is successfully condensed, a certain amount of divine power is needed as a primer. Coincidentally, you have a strand of divine power in your body, so. Chu Liyue's eyes flickered as she smiled faintly. I have divine power, and it's something that only happened recently. Could it be that you already knew at that time? So you got Shue to deliver the news? Debao and the other two were indeed powerful, but they couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert, so it was impossible for them to know about these things so quickly. In other words, they must have made this plan long ago. Then it definitely wasn't because of the divine power in her body. Dugumabao choked and immediately said, You misheard. You heard wrong. I was talking about the heavenly energy. You had it in your body before, didn't you? Chu Luiyue smiled but didn't say anything. The two of them were standing face to face, so of course she couldn't have heard wrongly. Moreover, there were 3 strands of heavenly Dao power in her body. One was obtained when she broke open the Tianling God realm, and the other 2 were obtained from the legendary 3-eyed eagle and dumpling. However, she was very tactful and didn't continue asking. Dugumabao obviously didn't want to answer this question directly now, so there was no point in asking anymore. Thus, she nodded to show that she understood and changed the topic. I see. Oh right, just now, Senior Lan Xiao said that you seem to have only. When Lan Xiao said a small problem, he was probably referring to Dugumabao's divine body being too young. Even though he always sounded like a child, Chu Luiyue definitely didn't believe that Dugumabao was a real 3-year-old child. This matter seemed to have something to do with her? Dugumabao frowned and returned to his usual expressionless face. It has nothing to do with you. Puffed. Suddenly a chuckle sounded beside his ear. Girl, don't listen to his excuses. Chu Luiyue was stunned. This was Lan Zhao's voice. She looked up and saw that Dugumabao didn't seem to have any reaction. Girl, don't worry. He can't hear this. We still have the ability to do that. You just have to listen to me. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and listened quietly, as if she was thinking about something. However, she was actually listening to Lan Xiao. He doesn't want to tell you these things, but I have to tell you. Lan Xiao stopped teasing her and became much more serious. We already know that you were harmed by that adulterous couple. Back then, you returned to Xiling to take revenge, right? Actually, at that time, we also wanted to help you and support you. Unfortunately, the 3 of us were trapped here and couldn't leave. Only by condensing a divine body could we break out of this cage. You should also be able to see that Big Bao is the strongest among us. He can also condense a divine body the fastest. In fact, he still needed 3 years to succeed. But at that time, in order to help you, he decided to forcefully break through. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat as she vaguely guessed something. Lan Xiao sighed softly. He broke through in advance. Although he barely succeeded, it's a pity that in the end, he really became like this. Once the divine body is condensed, it's hard to change. Chapter 10:20. Chu Liyue's heart shuddered violently. Didn't this mean that Debao might be like this for the rest of his life? A person's life was extremely long, let alone someone like Debao who had already stepped into the god realm and condensed a godly body. Although he looked cute now, he wasn't a real child. If he was trapped in the godly body of a 3-year-old forever, it would be an extremely torturous thing for anyone. Sure, don't let him see that you already know. Lan Xiao sighed. Even Diwu and I didn't know about this decision at first. If it wasn't for the failure, if it wasn't for the fact that we almost failed and woke us up, we wouldn't have known. He refused to tell you about this, and he didn't let us mention it either. But I don't think we should hide this from you. I'm not saying this to make you feel grateful to him, but to let you know, although some people choose to betray you, there are also people who will always be on your side, even if you have to pay a huge price. This was the first time Chu Liyue heard Lan Xiao speak so seriously. There seemed to be something surging in her chest. Her heart was hot and swollen, and even her limbs and bones seemed to have warmed up. She closed her eyes and hid the bitterness in them. When she looked up again, she had already regained her smile. No matter what, Debeo, I'm very happy to be able to help you. Since he had already condensed a godly body, Dugumabao was a free man. After being trapped in the Red Moon Desert for so many years, he was still not used to it when he suddenly came out. Especially in his current state. It took him a long time to gradually convince himself to ignore this point. After all, it was already very difficult to come out. After the two of them chatted for a while, Chu Luyue asked a question that had been hovering in her heart for a long time. Debeo, you know Rongxiu, right? Dugumabao glanced at her. Chu Luyue's eyes were calm. For you to be willing to let Shui deliver such important news, it's actually enough to prove this, isn't it? Hearing her name, Shui, who had been waiting patiently in the distance, became spirited. Then, he heard Dugumabao's cold voice. It just so happens that I needed to look for you. It came by itself. It would be a waste not to use it. Shui shuddered. She wanted to cry but had no tears. How could he have come by himself? If it wasn't for the master's order, why would it come to this place? He really had no animal rights. Chu Luyue paused. Dugumabao's words didn't directly answer her question. She looked up slightly and smiled. Debeo, you don't have to worry so much. I've already remembered many things, including the things that happened with Rongxiu in the Divine Ruins world. As soon as he said that, a trace of shock and surprise finally flashed through Dugumabao's beautiful and bewitching purple eyes. You remember everything? When did this happen? Chu Luyue calmed down. As expected, that cliff, that octagonal pavilion, it was indeed in the Divine Ruins world. And the person who played chess with her was indeed Rongxiu himself. The two of them clearly knew each other in the Divine Ruins world. Actually, the things she remembered were limited. This sentence was just a test. And Dugumabao's answer just so happened to confirm her previous guess. I don't remember everything. I just remember a part of it. Chu Luyue's mind raced. Since Dugumabao and the others knew about these things, it was obvious that they knew Rongxiu. Then, it seemed reasonable to ask Shui for help. However, these people had never revealed anything to her before. So this time, I plan to personally make a trip to the Divine Ruins world. Dugumabao frowned, his pinkish-white face looking solemn. Now, don't tell me you don't know how dangerous it is to go to the Divine Ruins world with your current strength? Since I've been there before, why can't I go now? Dugumabao wanted to say something but hesitated. Naturally, it's because you were stronger than you are now. However, thinking about how she did have a lot of trump cards on her, perhaps it might not be impossible. He thought for a moment. I'll go with you. Before Chu Luyue could react, Shui suddenly jumped up from afar. Roar! This ancestor wants to go with me? When the time comes, I'm afraid the sky will be overturned. Am I not welcome? Dugumabao glanced at it indifferently. Shui immediately lay down obediently. Hee, I'm just joking. How can I not welcome it? Chu Luyue. With Rongxiu's personality, how could he raise such an unprincipled beast like Shui? As if seeing through Chu Luyue's thoughts, Shui looked at her sadly. Did she forget how it had been tortured before? Who could withstand that? You don't agree? Dugumabao asked Chu Luyue. Although its tone was calm, its small face was filled with a clear, threatening aura. Chu Luyue raised her hands in agreement. Of course I agree. She wasn't faking her agreement. She really felt that this was quite good. The Divine Ruins world was mysterious and unpredictable. And there were many strong people. Although she had been there before, she almost couldn't remember anything now. She was afraid that she would be in the dark when she arrived. If Debeo could go with her, wouldn't it save her a lot of trouble? Besides, with such a strong person as her backing, she would indeed be more confident. Seeing Chu Luyue's sincere expression, Dugumabao nodded in satisfaction. Then let's set off today. Chu Luyue hesitated for a moment. Then, Snapper, Diwu and Lan Xiao will take care of her here. Chu Luyue thought about it. This was quite good. Although it might be a little difficult, it was indeed a rare opportunity for Snapper. Dugumabao was a strong person who had entered the god level. Diwu Zhangze and Lan Xiao would probably not be too far off. If it were anyone else, they might not even be able to meet them. Chu Liyue waved at Xue Xue. Xue Xue, we should go. When Xue Xue heard that, although it was a little unwilling, it still slowly moved over. It walked straight to Chu Liyue's feet, and quickly glanced at Duge Mabao, before leaning close to Chu Liyue. Dumpling, who was squatting on Xue Xue's shoulder, finally couldn't help but snicker. Xue Xue glared at it angrily. You're the only one who didn't make it in time. You can try the power of this ancestor. Young. Ignorant. A cold smile flashed across Dumpling's bright eyes. Then, it leaned its head and nestled in Chu Liyue's shoulder. Did it think it was stupid? Of course, it could tell that Duge Mabao was very strong and couldn't be offended. If it had its own master to rely on, why would it go to someone else to suffer? Heh. Xue Xue slowly widened its eyes. Its face was filled with grief and anger. In the end, it turned its head away angrily and didn't argue with it. It chose its own master. What could it do? Achoo! Rongxiu suddenly sneezed. He rubbed his nose. Looks like a certain someone hasn't been living very well recently. Chapter 1021. Chu Liyue had originally planned to look for Rongxiu and ask him about what happened back then. After knowing about the existence of the Divine Ruins world, he also wanted to inquire about it. Now that he knew that he was there, he naturally saved a lot of effort. In the end, he decided to let Xue Xue bring them there. Xue Xue originally wanted to resist, but after knowing that Duge Mabao was going with them, he gave up on the idea and obediently brought the two of them back. Of course, Xue Xue only carried Chu Liyue. As for Duge Mabao, he had already condensed a divine body, and his speed was only faster than Xue Xue's. Of course, he would travel alone. Thus the two of them and the beast set off just like that. The Divine Ruins world is thousands of miles away from here. Even if we travel at full speed, it will take nearly 10 days. On the way, Duge Mabao would occasionally answer Chu Liyue's questions. Most of them were related to the Divine Ruins world. During the journey, Chu Liyue also tried to ask him about what happened back then, but Duge Mabao kept his mouth shut. After trying twice, Chu Liyue simply gave up. If we use the teleportation array, will it take so long? Chu Liyue asked. Duge Mabao stepped on a purple short sword with his hands behind his back. He walked with the wind, his clothes fluttering. Of course, his expression was also very noble and cold. If one ignored his chubby face and his slightly protruding belly, due to his two short hands clasped behind his back, he was still very imposing. Hearing Chu Liyue's question, he snorted softly. There is no teleportation array between the Heaven's Canopy world and the Divine Ruins world. If you want to enter the Divine Ruins world, you must first reach the border of the Divine Ruins world, and then enter through a different entrance. Chu Liyue was a little surprised. After thinking for a while, he understood something. It seems that the people of the Divine Ruins world are really arrogant. They didn't even set up a teleportation array, which meant that they didn't intend to contact anyone from the outside world. If the people inside wanted to go out, there was nothing to say. However, if the people outside wanted to go in, they would have to cross thousands of rivers and mountains and go through many difficulties. Of course, Duge Mabao said nonchalantly, those who are able to establish themselves in the Divine Ruins world are the top clans of the continent. They have the right to be arrogant, so of course they think highly of themselves. Even if we reach the border, it won't be that easy to enter. Those entrances and exits are controlled by different sects and forces, and the security is extremely strict. As he spoke, Duge Mabao glanced sideways at Chu Liyue. If you are not from the Divine Ruins realm, if you want to enter, you have to be at least a stage 9 martial artist. With your current level, you won't be able to enter. Fortunately, you have a strand of divine power in your body. At that time, I might be able to force my way in. Chu Liyue gently nodded and silently clenched his fists. Duge Mabao's words were actually very objective. She indeed did not have that right now. Compared to the top powerhouses of the mainland, The current her was probably just an ant. The strong were respected. Only when she became stronger could she have the right to speak. Otherwise, she could only be trampled on by others. She did not even have the right to raise her head to look at others. Duga Mabao seemed to have seen through her thoughts. His expression changed slightly, and his voice softened a little. Although your current level is not high, you have recovered the Tianjin Yuan Meridian, and have several trump cards. You are not inferior to those disciples of the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue knew that he was comforting her. Her eyes curved slightly as she nodded seriously. Yes, I know. After a moment of silence, she suddenly thought of something and asked, Oh right, I haven't asked. What clan does Rong Xiu belong to? Previously, Rong Xiu had mentioned that his mother's clan was in the Heaven's Canopy world. Now it seemed that it was the Divine Ruins world. At that time, she vaguely felt that it should be a very large clan. It was just that she did not ask in detail, so she was not too sure. Since they were going to the Divine Ruins world now, they should have some understanding. Duga Mabao's expression suddenly became a little strange. When we arrive, you will naturally know. Chu Luiyue was stunned. They were almost there. But Duga Mabao was still keeping it a secret? But looking at his determined expression, she had no choice but to shrug her shoulders. All right. When we arrive, I will ask him personally. She also wanted to see how Rong Xiu would explain it when the time came. 10 days later, Chu Luiyue and Duga Mabao finally arrived at the border of the Divine Ruins world. This was a vast plain that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was very similar to the Heaven's Canopy world. There was also a translucent silver curtain that descended from the sky. However, the pressure from above was much stronger than that of the Heaven's Canopy world. Vaguely, one could see the occasional silhouette of a person flashing past behind the curtain. That should be the person in charge of guarding the border of the Divine Ruins world. At this moment, Chu Luiyue already felt a little stuffy in her chest before they even got close. If not for the fact that she had already broken through to become a rank 7 warrior, and had stored endless force and divine power in her body, she would probably have knelt on the ground at this moment. She looked around. On the boundless plain, there were not many people coming and going. Duga Mabao retracted his aura and descended from the sky. From here on out, everyone will have to walk. Chu Luiyue nodded. Follow me. Duga Mabao said and walked forward. Chu Luiyue quickly followed. The closer they got, the stronger the pressure. Chu Luiyue only felt that her shoulders were getting heavier and heavier, but fortunately, it was still within her tolerance range. When the two of them walked to a certain position, a figure suddenly flew out from the light curtain. At the same time, a huge rune appeared on the light curtain. This is the gate world of the Heavenly Cave Cliff. Who are you? Digression 6 p.m. Chapter 1022. A God-level expert. The moment Chu Luiyue saw the other party, she immediately felt a heavy pressure. She clenched her fists in her sleeves and straightened her back. Then, she took a step forward and said in a neither servile nor overbearing tone, I am Duguyu. Greetings, sir. She did not report her identity as Shang Guanyu or Chu Luiyue. Instead, she chose the same surname as Dabao and a fake name. She also wore a mask on her face and disguised herself as an ordinary woman. This was because she did not know what identity she had used when she came to the Divine Ruins world in the past. Moreover, she did not deliberately hide the fact that Chu Luiyue was Shang Guanyu. If someone investigated, they would know. Therefore, on the way here, she had already discussed with Dabao that she would completely change her identity to make things easier. Lin Xiao, who was in charge of guarding the gate, sized up the woman in front of him. She looked to be around 20 years old, and had an ordinary appearance. Only a pair of jet-black jade-like eyes could be seen as they moved. It was a pity that such eyes grew on such a face. But this was not the main point of his attention. Lin Zhao's expression was cold and solemn as he frowned. Those who are not from the Divine Ruins world, only those who have broken through to the 9th stage, and stepped into the Divine Realm, are qualified to enter. Are you enough? Between his words, there was a natural sense of superiority in his bones. It was not that he was deliberately looking down on Chu Luiyue, but that they had always been like this to people who were not from the Divine Ruins world. They were guarding this place, and had to see countless people who wanted to enter the Divine Ruins world every day. Some of them had true ability and relied on their own strength to break through that threshold and obtain permission to enter, thus stepping into a new stage. But such people were few and far between. The cultivation environment outside the Divine Ruins world was very ordinary. Those who could reach this step were all geniuses among geniuses. Sometimes, an empire might not be able to produce such an expert in hundreds of years. Most of the rest of them were trying to sneak in by swindling and using underhanded methods. Therefore, the guards here, no matter which clan they were from, scoffed at such people. When he heard that Chu Luiyue was from the Tianling dynasty, he naturally did not pay much attention to her. How could such a young girl have such ability? She was most likely here to play. If it wasn't for the fact that she seemed to have some kind of divine artifact on her that concealed her aura and made it impossible to tell what level she was at, he wouldn't even ask this question. Chu Luiyue did not mind his impatience. She smiled and raised her hand. A brilliant and dazzling origin power appeared at her fingertips. Lin Zhao's originally lazy and impatient expression suddenly froze, and a trace of shock appeared in his eyes. This was divine power. You are a demigod? He looked at the woman in front of him in bewilderment, and asked in disbelief. A demigod cultivator, a cultivator, a cultivator, a cultivator, a cultivator, a cultivator. Just like Taizu back in the day. Lin Zhao asked this, because he could see that the divine power the woman in front of him could use was limited. However, she did have divine power. In such a situation, she was basically a demigod. Dugamabao had told Chu Luiyue about this on the way here. Therefore, Chu Luiyue put away the ball of divine power, then smiled and nodded, taking advantage of the situation. I wonder if I am qualified to enter now. Of course, she was qualified to enter. Lin Zhao's expression changed, and the way he looked at Chu Luiyue again was very different from before. There was more respect. Is this your first time here? Chu Luiyue nodded. Those who are here for the first time have to register. Lin Zhao said and waved his wrist. A booklet appeared out of thin air. He opened the booklet and handed over a pen at the same time. You just need to write your name and the date. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. This booklet was not connected to an ordinary book. It was as heavy as a boulder. She almost couldn't hold it properly at first. The booklet had been opened, and what appeared in front of Chu Luiyue was a blank page. However, she could vaguely see that there were some names written on the front page, which were glowing with different colors. Chu Luiyue picked up the pen and wrote down her name. Duguyu. After writing, her wrists paused and she looked up at Lin Zhao. I wonder if this date, Xine Yuan calendar, year 3574, the 16th of September. Lin Zhao reminded her. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. The pen in her hand accidentally drew a line on the page. Lin Zhao frowned. What's wrong? Chu Luiyue immediately lowered her eyes. Nothing, it's just that. I feel that this calendar is a little strange. I've never heard of it before. Lin Zhao snorted with a hint of arrogance. You're not from the Divine Ruins world, so it's normal that you don't know about this. Remember, when you enter the Divine Ruins world in the future, follow this calendar. Chu Luiyue gripped the pen tightly, suppressed the waves in her heart, and wrote that line of words. Then, she handed over the booklet and pen, and smiled at him gratefully. Thank you for your reminder, sir. When she smiled, her eyes curved into crescents and her eyes shone brightly, adding a touch of charm to her originally ordinary appearance. Lin Zhao looked at her, and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. Although her appearance was ordinary at first sight, after looking at her for a long time, she was quite good-looking. Her speech and actions were also quite elegant, making people have a good impression of her. He glanced at the booklet and nodded. You can go in now. Chu Luiyue thanked him, and walked inside with Dugamabao. Wait! Lin Zhao suddenly reached out and stopped the two of them. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Lin Zhao raised her chin, and glanced at Dugamabao beside her. You can go in, but he can't. Chu Luiyue frowned. But didn't I already have the qualifications? That's you, not him. Lin Xiao shook her head, her attitude firm. Neither of you are from the Divine Ruins world. If you want to go in, the standards are the same. As soon as the two of them arrived, Dugu Mabao retracted his aura, so he looked no different from an ordinary child. Chu Luiyue glanced at Dugu Mabao. He had already condensed his body, so of course he was qualified to go in. It was just that for some reason, he seemed to be a little afraid and unwilling to show his true strength. Can't we bring family members? Chu Luiyue asked, unwilling to give up. Look, he's still so young. Suddenly, a cold wind blew from the back of her head. Chu Luiyue coughed and winked at Dugu Mabao. Do you still want to go in? Lin Xiao glanced at the two of them and said coldly, Don't worry. No. If you really can't you just hand the child over to his father? Why do you have to bring him along as his mother? Chapter 1023. Chu Luiyue's mind went blank. This person seemed to have gotten something wrong. Before she could say anything, she felt a cold air that could freeze a person to death suddenly erupt beside her. She turned her head and saw that Dugu Mabao's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Looking at his expression, Chu Luiyue was quick to react. She pressed his head with one hand and turned his face away. TSK, if he continued to look at me, I'm afraid that he would kill me with that gaze. Sir, you must be joking. Before Chu Luiyue could finish her explanation, Dugu Mabao grabbed Chu Luiyue's wrist and turned his head stubbornly. Anyone who saw the expression on his little face would have noticed that something was wrong. Lin Xiao seemed to have noticed something. She turned her gaze and looked down. Chu Luiyue bent down and quickly hugged Dugu Mabao with one hand and pressed his little head onto her shoulder with the other. Before Dugu Mabao could react, his whole body was suddenly lifted into the air, and he fell into a warm and sweet embrace. He turned his little hand and was about to hit her, but he held himself back in the end. Sir, look, it's not easy for me to take care of a child alone. A trace of misery quickly appeared on her face. Although she was still smiling, it only made people feel bitter. I don't know where his father is now. Dugu Mabao struggled violently, but unfortunately, Chu Luiyue hugged him tightly. On one hand, he did not want to use his strength. On the other hand, he was afraid that he would really hurt Chu Luiyue if he made a move. He could only rely on his short and fat body to try his best. Unfortunately, it did not work. The Bao, be good, be good. Chu Luiyue softly coaxed him. Her arms secretly clamped his waist so that he could not move. At the same time, her palm gently patted his back as if she was really coaxing a child. When Dugu Mabao heard this, he finally gave up struggling and buried his face tightly into Chu Luiyue's shoulder in despair. At this time it was better not to show his face. Otherwise, if this matter were to spread out, his reputation would be completely ruined. Seeing that he had finally stopped, Chu Luiyue secretly heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Lin Xiao pleadingly. Sir, please help us. Look, such a small child, if no one takes care of him. She had an aggrieved look on her face, which made one's heart ache. Lin Xiao's frown deeper, but she still waved her hand. No. There has never been a precedent like this before. How? Let them go in together. At this moment, a gentle voice came from behind them. Chu Luiyue turned to look. The person who came was a young man, who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. He was very handsome, and the color of his eyes was very light. There was a shallow crescent-shaped scar at the corner of his eye, which made his cold and distant temperament even more obvious. He wore a crescent-shaped white brocade robe and stood tall and straight. He deserved to be called an elegant young master. However, his face was very pale, especially his lips, which did not have any color in them. It looked as if he had been sick for a long time. It was as if a light touch would shatter like glass. However, Chu Luiyue quickly realized that this person's aura was very strong. He was also a powerhouse who had stepped into the god realm. It seemed like he was also a demigod. When Lin Xiao saw the person who came, her expression changed, and she immediately knelt down on one knee to greet him. Greetings, fourth young master. Cough, cough, cough. The young man was about to say something but suddenly coughed. Lin Xiao quickly went forward looking nervous. Fourth young master, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell again? The young man smiled faintly. My body has always been like this. I'm already used to it. He shook his head, indicating that he was fine, and pointed at Chu Luiyue and Lin Xiao. It's not easy for her to raise a child alone. No matter what, the child didn't commit any crimes. This child is only 3 years old, and he won't cause any trouble. It's fine to let him in. Why separate the mother and son over such a small matter? His tone was very calm, as if he was looking at Chu Luiyue and Lin Xiao, or as if he was recalling something. Lin Xiao did not dare to say anything. Everyone knew that the Heavenly Cave Cliff's matriarch had died in childbirth in order to give birth to the fourth young master, Lin Qifei. For many years, the fourth young master had been brooding about this. There were many rumors outside that the fourth young master was a freak who was born to jinx his mother to death. Although the higher-ups had always ordered that rumors were not to be spread, how could they control people's mouths? The fourth young master had more or less heard about it. This also caused his personality to be more sensitive, introverted, and indifferent. Under normal circumstances, he would not care about these things. Today, when he saw the scene of the mother and son being separated, he could not bear it, so he opened his mouth. Since the fourth young master has said so, then I will let them in. I hope the fourth young master can rest assured. Lin Xiao respectfully responded, and then said to Chu Luiyue, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and thank the fourth young master. Chu Luiyue immediately hugged Dabao and thanked Lin Qifei with a face full of gratitude. Thank you, fourth young master. Lin Qifei just waved his hand and said calmly, It's nothing. It's not easy for you to come this far. When you enter the Divine Ruins world in the future, you must take good care of him. As he spoke, he looked at Dugomabao, who was still lying in Chu Luiyue's arms. Although you are still young, I hope that you will be sensible soon and understand your mother's hard work. Chu Luiyue could clearly hear the sound of someone gnashing his teeth. She patted Dugomabao's head and smiled. Fourth young master, please rest assured. Please rest assured, fourth young master. Our Dabao has always been the most sensible. Originally, she wanted him to thank Lin Qifei and act out the whole show. However, after thinking about it, Chu Luiyue gave up. She still wanted to leave herself a way out. It was not good to be too ruthless. Lin Qifei coughed a few more times, and it was getting more and more intense. In the end, he had to take out a handkerchief to cover it, but it still did not ease. Lin Xiao did not care about Chu Luiyue and asked nervously, Fourth young master, why don't I go and ask someone to pick you up? Your body. Lin Qifei shook his head. I'll go back myself. Why should I let father and the others worry? After saying that, he moved and passed through the light screen. Chu Luiyue looked at his back and was slightly lost in thought. His illness seemed to be, All right, stop looking. Why aren't you going in? Lin Xiao sighed in his heart. He turned his head and saw that Chu Luiyue was still standing there in a daze. He hurriedly urged him. It's your great fortune to have the fourth young master's help today. But at this time, you must not tell anyone. Do you understand? Chu Luiyue repeatedly thanked him and promised that he wouldn't say anything more. Then he carried Dabao and walked forward. With a single kick, he crossed the light screen. What did you say? Rongxiu looked up from the booklet. She has a child with her? Yan Qing knelt on one knee, not daring to raise her head. Yes. I heard that she got in as a widow, and an orphan with fourth young master Lin's help. Rongxiu was so angry that he laughed and threw the booklet down. Orphan and widow. Digression. The content of the event has already been released. Everyone can click on it and take a look. There are no restrictions on the content of the long comments. Character analysis, mini-dramas, confession of love for the month of February are all accepted. Don't hesitate. In these few days, the first batch of chosen children is about to be born. It might be you. In addition, if you have more than 10 monthly votes, you have a chance to win first place. You can also fight for more than 120 recommendation votes. If you think you have a chance, you can join the group and fight the final battle at the end of the month. It's so big. Chapter 1024. Yen Qing's head drooped even lower. I knew that Madam was coming, but who would have thought that it would be like this? What does that child look like? I heard that it's a boy around 3 years old with purple hair and purple eyes. It's very easy to recognize him. Purple hair? Rong Xiao pondered for a moment, then suddenly thought of something. His slender fingers tapped on the table twice, and a look of understanding flashed across his eyes. After a moment he chuckled. She sure has a big heart. She was the only one who dared to pretend to be his mother. However, from this, it could be seen that that person treated her differently. If it was anyone else, they would have already died 10,000 times. Sensing that the anger on Rong Xiao's body seemed to have dissipated a little, Yen Qing raised his head and asked cautiously, "Then, Your Highness next. There's no need to interfere. Xue Xue is there to protect them. When they arrive, I will personally pick them up. Moreover, with that person around who could bully her." Although he was not very happy in his heart, since that person wanted to come, this was the only way. Yes. At this moment, Chu Luiyue stepped through the light screen and stepped into the Divine Ruins world. As his feet stepped on the thick ground, Chu Luiyue actually felt a sense of absent-mindedness. She calmed herself down and looked around. In front of her was still a vast plain. The sky was blue. At the place where the heavens and earth met, there was a city. The city was tall and grand, solemn and imposing. Outside the city, there was a huge barrier that enveloped it. Even from such a far distance, he could still feel the heavy pressure. That's the Heavenly Cave Cliff. Dugu Mabao jumped down from Chu Luiyue's embrace and spoke with a calm face. Heavenly Cave Cliff? Chu Luiyue had already heard of this name several times before. Is it also a clan in the Divine Ruins world? Within the Divine Ruins world, there are no empires or dynasties, only sects and clans. The stronger the sect, the higher its status, and the more resources and treasures it could occupy. There are no laws here. The only rule was that the weak were prey to the strong, and the strong were respected. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked. Although it was just a few simple sentences, she could hear the thick smell of blood. There are many sects and clans in the Divine Ruins world, but there are also differences in strength. Grotto Heaven Cliff can barely be considered third-rate here. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Third-rate? That young Master Lin from before had already stepped into the God realm at such a young age. Who would have thought that the family of such a person could only be considered third-rate? If this is only third-rate, then how powerful would the so-called first-rate be? Chu Luiyue couldn't help but murmur. Although it's a third-rate sect in the Divine Ruins world, to be able to get a third-rate ranking means that you've already won against more than half of the sects and clans. You must know that the vast majority of sects and clans do not have the qualifications to send people to guard the entrance to the Divine Ruins. Dugu Mabao glanced at her. Do you still remember the runes that appeared on the light screen just now? Chu Luiyue nodded. That's the totem of Grotto Heaven Cliff. There are very few people who can engrave their own totem on the light screen of the Divine Ruins world. Chu Luiyue understood. I understand. In other words, no matter how many times they are here, they are not people we can afford to offend? Dugu Mabao. Although he was expressionless, with his chubby little face, he looked even cuter. Especially those eyes that should have been filled with dignity and coldness. Because of the curly eyelashes that were too beautiful, they could not form any deterrence. Chu Luiyue could not help but reach out to rub his hair. Speaking of which, your performance just now was pretty good. Swoosh. Dugu Mabao immediately jumped 3 feet high and quickly retreated. He glared at Chu Luiyue's hand as if facing a great enemy. What are you trying to do? If he wanted to do what he did just now, that was impossible. Chu Luiyue coughed. Only then did she remember that the person in front of her was not a real child. She withdrew her hand embarrassedly. It's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I just wanted to say that we should go. Dugu Mabao still looked at her with vigilance. I'll walk on my own. After saying that, he moved to the side and turned to walk forward. Chu Luiyue rubbed the space between her eyebrows. TSK. What happened just now seemed to have left a big shadow on Debeo. She quickly chased after him and followed behind him. Don't worry, don't worry. If there are no special circumstances in the future, I promise that it won't happen again. Dugumabao did not say anything and silently sped up. There were not many people in the wilderness. Occasionally, they could see some people in a hurry. Most of their auras were very hidden. They seemed to be hiding their realms. After walking for a while, Chuluwa asked in a low voice. Although her strength could not be compared to most of the people here, she was extremely sensitive to the aura of the force. With one glance, she could roughly determine the other party's level. However, she had met a few people just now, but she could not find out the other party's background. Of course, although Dugumabao's face was still cold, he still answered Chuluyue's question. There is only one rule in the world of divine ruins. The strong are respected. In order to become stronger, the people here can do anything. If you directly expose your realm, it will definitely attract a lot of attention. Who knows when it will attract a lot of trouble? Unless you have a strong background, or have a strong person by your side, you should not easily reveal your level. Especially, Dugumabao stopped in his tracks and looked up at her. You're still so weak. Chuluwa choked. She had lived 2 lives, other than when she had just been reborn, and was called a good-for-nothing for a period of time. She was called a genius most of the time, whether they liked or disliked her. No matter how unwilling they were in this aspect, they would all admit that she was extremely talented. Only Debeo was always full of disdain for her. However, he was right. In this place, she was indeed very weak. She pursed her lips. Her desire to become stronger became even more urgent. Most people use yuan instruments to hide their auras. However, there are good and bad yuan instruments. Some of the top experts are still able to see through the yuan instrument and see through the cultivator's rank. Then mine. Don't worry about yours. Dugumabao said lightly. Your yuan instrument that hides your aura is still somewhat useful. Normal people can't see anything. Oh, Chuluyue responded as if she understood. She touched the silver ring around her neck that was the size of a fingernail. This thing was given to her by Dugumabao in the beginning. At that time, he only said that he had to hide his aura in order to smoothly pass through the border of the world of divine ruins. She did not expect it to be so important. However, she did not know what level this item was. There's a teleportation formation in the city ahead. Let's go there. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1025. The 2 of them walked all the way to the city gate. There were guards in charge of guarding the gate. They held long swords and stood on both sides. They were dressed in the same uniform and had the same tattoo on the left side of their chests. Chuluwa glanced at it. It was the one that appeared on the light screen when they came in earlier. It was the totem of Grotto Heaven Cliff. The city gate was obviously much livelier. There was an endless stream of people coming and going. Chuluwa led Dugumabao forward. The 2 of them were very eye-catching in the crowd. Chuluwa was wearing a mask and looked ordinary. But Dugumabao was the key. He had purple hair and purple eyes and was very cute. Plus, his eyes were unbelievably beautiful and clean. Anyone who saw him would like him. When such a small person walked on the street, 100% of the people turned to look at him. Chuluwa gradually felt that it was a little inconvenient to be stared at by more and more people. What she was most worried about was that if these people continued to stare, this little ancestor would lose his temper. She glanced at Dugumabao and saw that his face had turned cold. There was anger in his eyes. Oh my, whose child is this? Why is he so beautiful? When a big sister came forward to strike up a conversation and reached out to touch Dugumabao's face, his face finally darkened completely. Chuluwa saw that the situation was not right. She quickly pulled him behind her and smiled apologetically at the woman. I'm sorry. Our child is more introverted and is afraid of strangers. The woman was very disappointed that she did not manage to touch his chubby face. But since he had said so, she did not continue to disturb him. She could only leave reluctantly. Even after she had left, she kept looking back. Dugumabao said coldly, If you hadn't stopped me, I wouldn't have let her go so easily. She didn't mean any harm. Chu Luyue sighed, but could only persuade him. Any divine-level expert who had been reduced to such a state, and even had their face touched by a stranger, would probably be displeased. Anyway, we'll be leaving soon. Bear with it, okay? Dugumabao's heart felt stifled. She looked more like she was coaxing a child. He turned around and left in annoyance. Since she did not object, it meant that she agreed. Chu Luyue secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She thought for a moment and said, "Actually, if you don't look good, they wouldn't look at you like that. Get used to it, get used to it." In any case, she had already trained herself to be able to turn a blind eye to the various gazes of others around her. Dugumabao frowned. Of course he wasn't used to it. No one had ever dared to look at him like that before. Unless they were tired of living. But now, he could not say these words to her. After thinking about it, he could only endure it. Under the gazes of many people, the two of them finally arrived at the city gate and prepared to enter. Duguyu. As soon as he finished speaking, the guard's expression changed slightly. The person who was in charge of recording also raised his head and looked over. "You're Duguyu, who came from outside the Divine Ruins world." Chu Luyue nodded in confusion. However, at this moment, the surrounding voices suddenly fell silent. Almost everyone turned to look at him. All kinds of gazes were focused on Chu Luyue. Alarm bells rang in her heart, but she still looked calm on the surface. "Why, is there a problem?" "That's not it." The soldier in charge of the inspection smiled ambiguously and looked at Chu Luyue again. "It's just that it's been a long time since someone from the outside came to Heavenly Cave Cliff, so it's a little strange." Although he said it casually, Chu Luyue felt that things were not that simple. The reactions of the people around were a little strange. "Since Lord Lin Xiao allowed you to come in, just let him in." The guard asked for Dugumabao's name, and then raised his chin at the person in charge of recording. That person wrote down the names of the two of them. "All right, let's go in." Chu Luyue was suspicious, but she did not dwell on it. She thanked him and led Dugumabao into the city. After they left, the crowd started to clamor again. So he's from the outside. It's been a long time since an outsider came to Heavenly Cave Cliff, right? He looks young and ordinary. I didn't expect him to be able to come in. To be able to barge in from the outside. Who knows how old he is? He might be over 100 years old. Who cares how old she is? She dares to come here alone. She really has guts. He's just a little lamb. But he doesn't know that wolves are waiting for him. Once he goes in, he'll suffer. How long do you think he can last? Half a month? 10 days? An outsider with a child and a woman at that. If she can survive a day, I'll consider her capable. This time, Heavenly Cave Cliff will have a good show to watch. What are they talking about? After walking for a distance, Chu Luyue and Dugumabao turned into a remote path and spoke. After she left, she could vaguely hear some people talking about something at the city gate. It seemed it was all about her. Dugumabao's expression was cold. "It's just some nonsense. Don't pay attention to it." Hearing that, Chu Luyue did not continue to ask. Dugumabao continued. "The teleportation formation that leads to that place is also known as a level 1 teleportation formation. There's only one in the entire Heavenly Cave Cliff, so we can just go there directly." Chu Luyue was a little curious. "How do you know there's only one? Have you been here before?" "There's only one qualified to build a place like Heavenly Cave Cliff." Dugumabao said calmly. "Chu Luyue." Oh. After walking for a while, the two of them returned to a more lively street. Chu Luyue walked to a shop that sold medicinal herbs, and walked towards a shop assistant. "Hello. May I know how to get to the level 1 teleportation formation here?" Although Heavenly Cave Cliff was a city, it covered a large area. It was not convenient for her and Dugumabao to look around, so asking someone was the most convenient and fastest way. The shop assistant thought that Chu Luyue was there to buy medicinal herbs, but when he heard that, his face immediately drooped and his eyelids were half opened. "You want to go there?" "Yes. Please show me the way." Chu Luyue did not seem to care about his cold attitude. She still had a smile on her face. I'm advising you not to go. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why is that? Hey, why else? Look over there. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed in a certain direction. Chu Luiyue looked over, and indeed saw a faint light shining over there. Of course it's because the teleportation formation is broken. The shop assistant crossed his arms. Even the cliff master and the others can't use it now. Let alone you? If there's nothing else, hurry up and leave. Don't delay our business here. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. It was not easy to come in, but the teleportation formation was broken. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1026. Is there really no other way? In a tea house, Chu Luiyue and Dugu Mabao sat opposite each other. Chu Luiyue looked in the direction of the teleportation formation again and asked, unwilling to give up. No. Dugu Mabao's answer was very straightforward. The power of space in the divine ruins is mixed, and the sects are very far away from each other. If ordinary people want to travel here, they have to rely on teleportation formations. Even with the divine beast leading the way, it's very easy to get lost. But we still have Snowy. It won't get the wrong place, but the journey is long, and we'll spend a lot of time on the way. Most importantly, it's easy to attract trouble. In the wilderness, killing intent is everywhere. If we're not careful. Chu Luiyue understood without saying anything else. She rubbed her eyebrows. In other words, we can only rely on the teleportation formation. But now, the teleportation formation at Grotto Heaven Cliff is broken. What should we do? Either this teleportation formation is repaired quickly, or we can change to another teleportation formation. If that grade 1 teleportation formation couldn't be used, then they could use other grade 2 or grade 3 teleportation formations to go somewhere else. It couldn't be that every grade 1 teleportation formation was broken, right? It's not impossible, but it'll be more troublesome. Chu Luiyue was helpless. But now this is the only way. Are we going to wait here for them to fix the grade 1 teleportation formation? Who knew how long they would have to wait? Dugu Mabao thought for a moment and finally nodded in agreement. Chu Luiyue asked around and found out that there were 2 grade 2 teleportation formations here. And they led to 2 different places. After discussing, the 2 of them walked out of the tea house. I'll choose one randomly, no matter which one it is, as long as we can get to the place. Before Chu Luiyue could finish her sentence, she suddenly felt a cold air coming toward her. She stopped in her tracks and looked up abruptly. Who is it? This was a bluestone path. There was no one in front or behind, and it was very quiet. However, Chu Luiyue was still very vigilant, and he began to secretly circulate the force in his body. As expected of someone who could barge in from the outside. You're quite alert. A low and deep voice sounded, carrying a trace of malice. Then the void in front of Chu Luiyue suddenly rippled. A huge hand tore the void apart with incomparable force. A man walked out from within. He looked to be in his 30s. He was tall and had a square face. There was an inch-long scar on his left cheek that looked like a centipede, giving him a ferocious aura. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. This person's strength was definitely far above hers. The man's eyes swept over Chu Luiyue. When he saw the universe ring on her hand, his eyes lit up. Oh, you really do have some good treasures on you. The level of this interspatial ring was not low. There must be a lot of good stuff inside. The ones he had encountered before were all inferior to this one. He stretched out his hand and said in a commanding tone, "Don't worry. As long as you hand over the interspatial ring on your hand, I promise I won't kill you." Chu Luiyue's eyes were slightly cold. You want my interspatial ring? The man chuckled and stroked the stubble on his chin. If you want to give me something else, it's not impossible. Although her face is ordinary, her body is top-notch. Chu Luiyue was not angry. Instead, she smiled and asked softly, "What if I say no?" Digression, my heart is so tired. In order to let the bookstore synchronize the chapters of the surrounding activities, I specially asked the editor to open the second volume. However, the second volume was a free volume. The chapters would be posted here by default. So, I didn't read it clearly just now and accidentally posted it as a free chapter. Thank you for Yu and Lizzie's reminder. I will try to pay more attention in the future. The insomnia headache continued at 6:00 p.m. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1027. What kind of place do you think this is? Do you think you can say no? The man obviously didn't take Chu Liyue's words to heart. He smiled sinisterly, and his eyes were full of contempt and provocation. You are an outsider. This is your first time in the world of divine ruins. There are some rules that you don't understand. I Lu Yi will teach you. Anyone who came here would more or less have to do something. Otherwise, this cave heaven cliff is extremely dangerous. It's not certain if you can get out. As he spoke, he sneered coldly and his gaze swept over Dugumabao. It would be a pity if something happened to such a beautiful and cute child. Don't you think so? Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. Are you threatening me? How can it be a threat? I'm just telling the truth. As Louis spoke, the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing an oppressive smile. I don't want to waste time. You'd better hand over the interspatial ring to me. As soon as his voice fell, the aura on his body suddenly burst out. Chu Liyue's pupils shrank. A demigod expert. At this level, she couldn't beat him no matter what. Thinking about it carefully, those who could break into the world of divine ruins from the outside were all experts who had stepped into the realm of gods. Among them, the weakest was a demigod. If Lu Yi wasn't strong enough, he wouldn't dare to do this. Brother, let's talk about it. Chu Liyue's sharp look quickly disappeared and replaced it with a kind smile. Louis sneered. You know what's good for you. Give it to me. Chu Liyue touched the interspatial ring, as if she was really going to take it off. At the same time, a trace of embarrassment appeared on her face. Actually, this ring is very important to me, so why are you dawdling? If you can't take it off, I'll take it myself. As Louis spoke, he strode toward Chu Liyue. So, don't even think about it. A cold light flashed in Chu Liyue's eyes. At the same time, the peach blossom on the inner side of her wrist suddenly bloomed. Louis thought to himself, not good. He immediately summoned a long saber and slashed forward. How dare you? Whoosh. The two figures instantly disappeared from where they stood. Clang. The long saber landed heavily on the ground, emitting a crisp sound. Louis quickly looked around, but there was no one. There wasn't even the slightest bit of spatial fluctuation. Cunning. Louis was enraged. A moment of carelessness had actually allowed the other party to escape. But at the same time, doubt arose in his heart. Only those who had completely stepped into the god realm could teleport. A demigod like him could only watch helplessly. However, that woman didn't seem to have used her own power to teleport. Could he have used some yuan instrument? As he thought of this, his heart trembled. An origin tool that could teleport was extremely rare. In the entire Paradise Cliff, there were probably less than 3 people that possessed such a treasure. If he could snatch it, however, from the looks of it, that woman really did have some treasures, Louis thought for a moment, and a trace of hesitation flashed in his heart. To be able to have so many good things, that woman's identity should not be ordinary. However, on second thought, Louis dispelled the idea. She was just an outsider. What kind of good background could she have? She must have gotten it by luck, and he didn't know how she got it. That woman could teleport. It would be difficult for him to quickly catch her with his own strength. However, he had many spies in Paradise Cliff. As long as he gave the order, he would not have to worry about not being able to find her. A trace of gloominess flashed in his eyes, and he quickly left. Back at the city gate, those people were talking behind his back. This should be what they were talking about, right? After escaping for some distance, Chu Liyue found a secluded corner. After confirming that the person had escaped, he breathed a sigh of relief. Duga Mabao glanced at the hand that was still unconsciously held by her. He wanted to pull it away, but when he remembered how she had grabbed his hand without hesitation when she escaped, he hesitated again. After hesitating for a long time, he finally decided to turn his face away and pretend that he did not see it. Debeo, what do you think? Debeo? Chu Luyue shouted twice before Duga Mabao's attention was pulled back. Duga Mabao responded indifferently. His expression seemed to be a little impatient, but he did not stop explaining. The people of the Divine Ruins world are naturally hostile and disdainful of outsiders. They will usually find ways to bully them. Moreover, this place is full of crooks and dragons. Right now, in their eyes, you are just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. It's just that those people will never think that Chu Luyue is a piece of iron. I see. Chu Luyue nodded. Only then did she realize that she was still holding Duga Mabao's hand. She quickly let go and giggled. It was a special situation just now. Debeo, you don't mind, right? Duga Mabao's hand was suddenly let go. He immediately felt empty, as if something was missing. Hearing Chu Luyue's question, he frowned and replied with a faint hum. Chu Luyue did not notice his subtle mood. She crossed her arms, leaned against the wall, and thought to herself. Then we are in a bit of trouble now. The other party dared to make a move in broad daylight. He must have a certain background here. What if he was determined to deal with her? She was not confident that she could win. That Louis has good eyesight. With just a glance, he was sure that there was a treasure in it. Chu Luyue slowly turned the interspatial ring on her hand. When Rong Xiao sent Yin Qing to deliver this thing, she immediately saw that the interspatial ring was of a very high level. She just did not expect that it would cause her such trouble now. Duga Mabao could not help but snort with undisguised contempt and disdain. If he really has good eyesight, he won't. He won't come up to snatch the interspatial ring. Unfortunately, he has bad eyesight. He doesn't even know who he has offended. What? Chu Luyue asked curiously. Nothing. Duga Mabao glanced at the sky. Let's go to the second-level transmission array first. There were 2 second-level transmission arrays in Dongtian Cliff City, located in the north and south of the city. The 2 went directly to the south of the city. From afar, the 2 of them saw the huge teleportation array. There was a circle of guards around the transmission array. Their clothes were also tattooed with the totem of the Lin family of Dongtian Cliff. Chu Luyue was secretly shocked. Although it was only a second-level transmission array, its size and scale were more powerful than the largest transmission array in the Tianling dynasty. In other words, there was no room for comparison between the 2. It was already afternoon, but there were still people coming and going around the transmission array. Everyone would first go to the bottom left when they boarded the transmission array. It seemed that there was a charge for it. Chu Luyue walked over with Duga Mabao and said politely, "Hello. We want to board the transmission array and go to the nearest city from here." The man looked up at her. When he saw Duga Mabao next to her, he narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "I won't take your order. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network." Chapter 1028. Why? Chu Luyue looked at the people in front of him who had already paid and boarded the teleportation formation. If they can, why can't I? The guard snorted and revealed a sarcastic smile. You have to ask yourselves this. You offended someone you shouldn't have, and you still ask why? Chu Luyue frowned and suddenly understood. It seemed that it was Lu Yi's fault. Chu Luyue had long expected that he wouldn't let it go, but he didn't expect his power and means to be so powerful that he could directly prohibit them from boarding the teleportation formation in such a short time. Logically speaking, this teleportation formation should belong to the Lin family. Who is that Lu Yi to have such power? Chu Luyue calmed down. I'll pay twice the price. The guard didn't even raise his head. Don't think about it. Anyway, we won't let you go up. You give up. Next. 5 times. Chu Luyue took a step forward. If 5 times is not enough, I'll pay 10 times. The surrounding people quieted down and looked over with different expressions. What a big tone. She actually wants to pay 10 times. Does she know how much the last teleportation formation cost? How dare she boast like this? I think they look a little familiar. Hey, they seem to be the 2 outsiders who entered the city today. That child has purple hair and purple eyes. Isn't that her? Yes, yes. I heard about it too. It's them. It seems that they really offended someone. Now it's difficult for them to move at Cave Heaven Cliff. The surrounding people were discussing. Chu Liyue's heart sank slightly. Sure enough, the guard opposite him shrugged without a smile. I said, no matter how much money you pay, it's useless. If you have the time, you'd better apologize to them as soon as possible, so that it won't be too ugly in the end. With that, he waved at the people behind him. What are you waiting for? Don't you want to board the teleportation formation? Hurry up. The people behind Chu Liyue hurriedly stepped forward and pushed her away. Coming. Chu Liyue took 2 steps back and subconsciously pulled Duga Mabao behind him to protect him. She stood there for a while, then turned and left. Let's go take a look at the other teleportation array. The result was as expected. The other teleportation portal also firmly rejected Chu Liyue. Even the remaining 3 level 3 teleportation arrays were the same. In other words, Chu Liyue and Duga Mabao no longer had the chance to leave this place and head to other places. In the blink of an eye, it was already night time. Chu Liyue found an inn to rest, but he was not in the mood to sleep. It seems that this Lu Yi's identity is indeed not ordinary. He was even more scheming than she had expected. At this level, he could already be considered a local tyrant. He must be related to the Lin family. Duga Mabao sat on the chair and said calmly, the various sects and clans are in charge of the teleportation formations in their respective territories. On the one hand, building such a teleportation formation requires several top experts to work together. On the other hand, the cost of maintenance is extremely high. That's why they send people to guard the teleportation formation and charge people to come and go to maintain a profit. Under normal circumstances, they won't go against money. Therefore, the person who can mobilize these guards and make them firmly refuse to let us enter the teleportation formation is definitely not an ordinary person. Chu Liyue fell silent. Knock knock. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Chu Liyue went to open the door, and the waiter handed her a letter. Dear guest, your letter. Who could she receive a letter from in this place? Chu Liyue had already guessed something in her heart. She directly took the letter and opened it. She quickly skimmed through it. If you've thought it through, go to the Lu residence in Kowtow in person and admit your mistake. The handwriting was sloppy and the tone was arrogant. There was no signature, but it was not difficult to guess that this was Lu Yi's letter. Chu Liyue's eyes were cold as she called out to the waiter who was about to leave. Stop. The waiter turned around. Dear guest, do you have any other orders? Chu Liyue waved the letter in her hand. Who is this Lu Yi? A trace of nervousness flashed across the waiter's face. Chu Liyue threw a bag over. If you can tell me clearly, there is more. Although the waiter was afraid, he couldn't help but secretly think twice, and the look in his eyes wavered. This person is actually quite famous in Cave Heaven Cliff, and it's all because of his sister. Chu Liyue threw another bag over. Continue. Money makes the world go round. After Chu Liyue generously offered, she got a lot of information from the waiter. It turned out that Lu Yi's sister, Lu Yu was the current matriarch of the Lin family. Lu Yu originally came from an ordinary family, but she relied on the Lin family and soared. Even her entire Lu family was basking in the glory. Lu Yi was her only brother, and he had always been doted on. That was how he became arrogant, domineering, and presumptuous. Originally, his cultivation talent was not particularly outstanding. It was only thanks to Lu Yuer's efforts that he was finally able to reach the demigod realm by throwing countless good things at him. But this Lu Yi liked to stir up trouble. With this backing, he naturally didn't take others seriously. Usually, he took pleasure in robbing others of their treasures. Many people in Cave Heaven Cliff had been taken advantage of by him, but they didn't dare to say anything. After all, the entire Cave Heaven Cliff belonged to the Lin family. Who dared to fight with them? As for the itinerant cultivators like Chu Liyue, who came from outside, he bullied them even more. This time, he was annoyed by Chu Liyue, so he was ruthless and directly blocked all the teleportation formations. It was obvious that he wanted to force Chu Luyue to bow down. He had forced her into a corner. Before the waiter left, he didn't forget to persuade Chu Luyue to beg for mercy as soon as possible. Otherwise, her days in Cave Heaven Cliff would become more and more difficult. Chu Luyue didn't comment. When there was no one else in the room, she directly burned the letter. He wants me to kowtow and apologize. He thinks he's a big shot. Chu Luyue sneered. Back at ancient Phoenix Mountain, when she met the remnant consciousness of the northern underworld Taizu, she didn't back down. Let alone a mere good-for-nothing rich kid who couldn't be helped. Dugu Mabao looked up slightly, and a faint glow flickered in his beautiful purple eyes. Do you want me to do it? Chu Luyue shook her head. No need. I have my own way to deal with him. She knew Dugu Mabao had his concerns. Although she didn't know why, she didn't want to trouble him unless it was a critical moment. What way? Dugu Mabao frowned slightly. You won't be a match for him if you rely on yourself. Chu Luyue curled her lips into a smile. He has a backer. Why don't we find a more powerful backer? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1029. The next morning, Chu Luyue brought Dugu Mabao to the entrance of the Lin clan. The two of them standing in front of the entrance was very eye-catching. Chu Luyue stepped forward and bowed politely. Sirs, please inform the Lin clan's patriarch that my daughter, Dugu Yu, would like to see him. The Lin clan's patriarch was naturally the cliff master of Cave Heaven Cliff, Lin Tianfeng. The two guards looked at each other. One of them asked, Do you have an appointment? Chu Luyue shook her head. No. Do you have an invitation? No. Do you have a letter of recommendation? No. The guard's expression turned ugly. She had nothing, yet she wanted to see him. How bold. He waved his hand impatiently. I won't see anyone who doesn't have that. Chu Luyue smiled. I know it's rude for me to visit you so suddenly, but I do have an important matter to attend to. Please help me, sirs. It's not a matter of whether we help or not. There are many people who want to see the patriarch. If we inform him of any random person's visit, what will happen? Lin Tianfeng is the most important person in Cave Heaven Cliff. How can you meet him just because you want to? With that, the guard urged her to leave. Chu Luyue didn't take it to heart, and continued. Sirs, you only need to tell him that the Lin clan's patriarch will be willing to see me. The guard seemed to have heard a joke. Oh, then tell me, what is it? Chu Luyue put her hands behind her back and said calmly, I can cure fourth young Master Lin's chronic illness. She really said that. Lin Tianfeng was lying on a small bed. When he heard this, he pushed away Lu Yuer's hand that was massaging his temples, and stood up abruptly. He looked excited. Lu Yuer's brows furrowed, but she quickly smoothed them out. Although she was already in her 30s, she still looked like a girl in her early 20s, because of her good maintenance. Coupled with the mature charm in her eyes, she was indeed very beautiful. However, at this moment, Lin Tianfeng only had the guard's words in his mind. She really has a way to cure Jifei's illness? The guard hurriedly said. Yes, that's what she said. Hurry up. Lin Tianfeng said anxiously. For so many years, his youngest son's health had always been a thorn in his heart. She had tried countless methods to seek medical treatment, but there was no obvious improvement. Naturally, he couldn't contain his excitement. Master, don't be anxious. Since it was related to Jifei, everything had to be done with extra caution. Lu Yuer stood up, leisurely walked to his side, and gently advised him. At the very least, shouldn't you at least ask what rank the heavenly doctor is? Right. Look at me, I even forgot about this. Lin Tianfeng clapped his hands and asked. What grade is she? She wasn't wearing a celestial physician's robe, so I'm not too sure. But when I heard that she could cure fourth young master, I hurried over. The guard's back was drenched in cold sweat. He had indeed neglected this point, but he could only brace himself and say it. As long as he said it was for the sake of fourth young master, the head of the house wouldn't be so calculative. As expected, Lin Tianfeng frowned when he heard this, but he didn't get angry. Lu Yue scolded him from the side. What are you doing? You didn't even gather such crucial information, and you dare to report it? The guard hurriedly knelt down and admitted his mistake. Lu Yue stretched out her hand and grabbed Lin Tianfeng's arm. A trace of worry flashed across her face. Master, I know you're doing this for Jifei's sake, but we've met a lot of celestial physician over the years. If we let her in and treat Jifei then, I'm afraid it's not good. Besides, Jifei has always been afraid of strangers. Lin Tianfeng felt a headache coming on. The guard asked tentatively, Then should I let her go? Lin Tianfeng gritted his teeth. Let her in first. I'll see her in person. No matter what, he had to give it a try. Lu Yue's face stiffened for a moment. Then she quickly lowered her eyes to hide the jealousy in her eyes. He wouldn't even let go of a glimmer of hope. He really cared about Lin Qifei the most. Chu Luyue led Dugu Mabao into the Lin mansion under the guard's lead. As the noblest place in Cave Heaven Cliff, the Lin mansion occupied a vast area and was exquisite and luxurious. Whether it was the pavilions, terraces, or trees, they all exuded a noble aura. In addition, there were many Xian formations set up in the courtyard. Chu Luyue walked along. Although she didn't meet many people, there were many hidden auras. She calmly followed the guard all the way forward and quietly memorized everything she saw in her mind. When she reached the front hall, Lin Tianfeng was already waiting there. Chu Luyue recognized him at a glance. Although he was middle-aged, Lin Tianfeng was graceful and elegant, and it wasn't difficult to see his handsome appearance when he was young. Lin Qifei indeed resembled him. Chu Luyue walked over and bowed. Dugu greets clan head Lin. Lin Tianfeng looked at her in surprise. He only heard the guard say that it was a woman, but he didn't know that she was so young. At this age, could there really be a way to cure Jifei's illness? Thinking of this, he directly asked, May I know what grade Miss Dugu is now? Chu Luyue smiled faintly. 7th grade. Digression. Everything is not going well today, I'm so angry. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 1030. As soon as she finished speaking, the hall fell silent. Lin Tianfeng's face became a little stiff. 7th grade. Chu Luyue nodded slightly. She had no problem refining a 7th grade pill now. As for higher grades, she hadn't tried it yet, so it was better not to say for the time being. A mere 7th grade. And you dare to boast that you can cure my son's illness? Lin Tianfeng was so angry that he laughed. He was so excited before, thinking that he had finally met an expert. Who knew? It was just a 7th grade celestial physician. Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows slightly. A 7th grade celestial physician was definitely in existence that everyone admired in the Tianling dynasty. But here, she was obviously not taken seriously at all. Guards, kick her out right now. Lin Tianfeng was full of anger. With a flick of his sleeve, he sent someone to do it. Wait, Chu Luyue said calmly. Her voice was very soft, but it carried a kind of pressure and power that couldn't be ignored, making the guards who were about to step forward subconsciously stop in their tracks. Master Lin, just because I'm a 7th grade celestial physician, you won't even give me a chance to try. Are you going to kick me out? A 7th grade celestial physician? You don't even have the qualifications to be the Lin family's celestial physician elder. You want me to give you a chance to try? Lin Tianfeng's face was full of anger, and he couldn't help but snort coldly. In your dreams. The lowest level celestial physician in the Lin family was an 8th grade mid-grade. The strongest one could even refine a 9th grade peak pill. And even they couldn't do anything about Jifei's illness. Why would they care about such a 7th grade celestial physician? Lin Tianfeng even felt that the woman in front of him was here to make a fool of him. He glanced at Dugu Mabao from the corner of his eye. If it weren't for the fact that she had a child, he would have already attacked her. Go. If you continue to pester me, don't blame me for being impolite. Chu Luyue's lips curved up slightly. Patriarch Lin, 4th young Master Lin, was born with a weak constitution and had this illness since birth. But it should have only gotten worse in recent years, right? Lin Tianfeng had already planned to turn around and leave, but when he heard this, His footsteps suddenly stopped. He turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue in surprise. Chu Luiyue continued. If I'm not wrong, fourth young master Lin started coughing blood about a year ago. Lin Tianfeng's expression suddenly changed. His eyes were fixed on Chu Luiyue as he ordered the guards around him. All of you go down first. Without my permission, no one is allowed to come in. The guards looked at each other in dismay, but they hurriedly responded respectfully. Yes. With that said, the crowd quickly retreated. Soon, only Chu Luiyue, Dugu Mabao, and Lin Tianfeng were left in the hall. You. How did you know? Lin Tianfeng asked with a tense expression. Lin Qifei had been careful to keep the matter of vomiting blood a secret. Almost no one in the residence knew about it. Even he only found out about it by chance half a year ago. This Dugu Yu was very unfamiliar and looked very ordinary. Logically speaking, it was impossible for her to know about this. Naturally, I could tell. Chu Luiyue smiled. There's something that I forgot to tell you. I'm not from Heavenly Cave Cliff, but from outside the world of God. A few days ago, when I was passing by the gate of the world of God, I happened to meet fourth young master Lin and had a few words with him. At that time, he kept coughing, so I could tell. Lin Tianfeng was stunned and took a while to react. You're an outsider? Yes. You met Ji Fei before? Yes. You could deduce so much just by listening to his coughing. Of course not. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows slightly. At that time, I also took a few more glances at fourth young master Lin's face. Combining the two, I was able to guess. Lin Tianfeng sucked in a breath of cold air. This woman, did he really have such great ability? One had to know that even the most powerful celestial physician in Heavenly Cave Cliff could not tell anything was wrong with him before personally taking his pulse. Yet she was able to guess so much just from this brief meeting. Lin Tianfeng did not dare to believe it. But since this woman said that she was an outsider, there was no point in lying. Could it be true? You. Lin Tianfeng spoke hesitantly, but did not know what to say. On one hand, this woman's level was not high, and she was a stranger from outside the world of God. Her background was unknown. On the other hand, she did seem to have some ability. Are you really confident? Lin Tianfeng was a little shaken. Chu Luiyue smiled. Patriarch Lin, this is Heavenly Cave Cliff, the Lin family's territory. No matter how stupid I am, I will not take the initiative to cause trouble in the Lin family. What do you think? When she said that, Lin Tianfeng suddenly felt that it made some sense. She was an outsider with a child. Logically speaking, she did not have any background here. Since she dared to come directly, she most likely had a plan. Lin Tianfeng hesitated for a while before finally gritting his teeth. If that's the case, I'll give you a chance first. You. Master, you can't. Before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. Chu Luiyue looked back. A woman in a luxurious dress was leisurely walking over. She looked very young and beautiful. Why are you here? Lin Tianfeng was a little surprised. Chu Luiyue lowered his eyes. So this person was Lu Yu'er. She should be in her 30s. But he really could not tell at all. No wonder she could climb up to Lin Tianfeng with an ordinary background. Lu Yu'er went straight to Lin Tianfeng's side. She frowned and asked in a soft voice. Master, I saw that you chased the guards out just now and was worried that something might have happened, so I rushed in. You won't blame me, right? Lin Tianfeng patted her hand. Why would I blame you for such a small matter? Don't think too much. It's just that I'm discussing something with this Miss Dugu. Lu Yu'er's gaze turned, as if she had just seen Chu Luiyue. When she saw the woman's ordinary face and the child standing next to her, she secretly sighed in relief. These days, she had seen countless little bitches who wanted to use the opportunity to climb up the ranks. They really used all kinds of methods. If she had not strictly guarded the position for so many years, how could she have gotten the position of the matriarch? This must be Miss Dugu. She slowly smiled, her eyes beautiful, but a faint trace of doubt appeared in her heart. This woman seemed to be here to treat Lin Qifei, but looking at her, she didn't seem to be a powerful person. Master, look at Miss Dugu. She's young and has a child. Don't scare her. she said as if she was joking. Lin Tianfeng shook his head. That won't happen. I'm going to ask her to check Zhifei's pulse and see what's going on. What? Lu Yuer was shocked and blurted out. How can that be? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.